Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this Dental Board of California meeting. I am Dr. Alan Felsenfeld and serve as the president of the board. Today is Thursday, August 17, 2023. This board meeting is being held in person. In full disclosure, I've got to tell you that I have a little cold and my ears are a little bit stuffed. It's not fun. My hearing has been somewhat decreased. I don't think it's going to result in hearing aids, but you never know. I'm going to ask anybody who speaks, our board members, our public comments, and anyone who speaks to speak close to the microphone and in their outside voice so I can actually hear you, please. I hope I don't have to remind you, but it's important that we all hear up here, especially me, because I'm trying to run the meeting, okay? Please bear with me on that. This is an official business meeting of the Dental Board of California, and depending on the number of people who would like to testify on a particular agenda item, a total time limit will be imposed. We're going to use a 2-minute time limit for talking, and at 30 seconds, you'll be warned that you have 30 seconds left and expect you to finish within 2 minutes. We ask all speakers to please stay on topic and not repeat testimony already provided. If you agree with the testimony that was provided, you just state your name and that you are in support of the comments previously provided. If a time limit is necessary, keep your comments within that time limit just to keep the meeting going in a very neatly organized fashion. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Oh, we have a security announcement before we start. Okay, who's going to do that for us? Thank you. Thank you very much.
Good morning, Investigator Tippins, Sacramento County or Sacramento Enforcement Unit. In the event that we have any kind of disturbance here at the meeting today, we'll pause the meeting. If we need to evacuate the room, we'll ask that all board members and individuals here attending the meeting exit through that door right back there in that corner. It says exit. Take a right-hand turn, go down the hallway and exit the building, and then the investigators will attend to any issues that take place in the room.
Okay, thank you, Investigator Tippins. That's very good. I would like to call the meeting to order and ask the board secretary to please call the roll.
Good morning. This is Dr. Lila Larin, Board Secretary.
Dr. Larin, please, to the microphone and loud.
Good morning. This is Dr. Lilia Larin, Board Secretary. I will now call the roll. Chan?
Chan, aye.
Chan, present. Felsenfeld?
Felsenfeld, aye.
Present. Forge?
Forge, aye.
Forge, present. Larin, present. McKenzie?
McKenzie, here.
McKenzie, present. Medina?
Medina, present.
Medina, present. Molina?
Molina present.
Molina, present. Olage?
Olagi present.
Olage, present. Pacheco?
Pacheco here.
Pacheco, present. Thakur? Absent. You?
You, I. Are you
You
present? Sorry.
You present. A quorum has been established.
Thank you, Dr. Larin. Item number 2 is public comment on items not on the agenda. Before we open public comment on matters not on the agenda, I would like to remind individuals making comments not to discuss pending complaints, pending licensing applications, or pending disciplinary actions that may later become before the board for a decision. Such discussions are considered ex parte communications as they could provide information to the board members that is outside of the record in violation of the Administrative Procedure Act. Such discussions could create a conflict and lead to a board decision being challenged in a superior court. Accordingly, if an individual makes comments on a pending disciplinary matter, the individual will be interrupted. The board can, of course, receive comments regarding the board's processes in general, but it cannot receive comments on specific cases, circumstances where the decision is still pending. In addition, public comments should address the board as a whole and not individual members. Please be aware that public comment during this agenda should provide information to board members, but it is not a discussion between the board members and the public. The only action board members can take right now is to listen to comments and decide whether or not they would like to have a future agenda item on this topic. Though this may seem at times like the board members are not being responsive, following these guidelines is critical to ensure the rules of the Open Meeting Act are followed to avoid compromising the speaker's goals or the board's mission. In the interest of time, as we've done in the past, we would like to request that public comments not repeat statements being made by a prior commenter. If you are in support of the comment, please say that you are. State your name and association and your support for the comment that was made. Legislative hearings use this practice on a regular basis, and it's a good way to ensure that we can hear from everyone today. With that being said, are there any public comments before we get further into the agenda? Seeing none, we're going to go on to item number 3, discussion and possible action on May 18th and 19th, 2023 board meetings. Is there any board member discussion? Do we have to make that change? Yeah. Ms. Welch?
I can do it.
Okay, so we need a correction to the meeting minutes. So these are, it's page 14 of the meeting materials, page 8 of the minutes. Fourth paragraph down, it begins with Ms. Becker. Second line, remove and replace California Association of Extended Functions, CAEF, with California Extended Functions Association, paren, CEFA, end paren.
This is what was discussed this morning. This was brought up at the Dental Assisting Council this morning, so we would like to have a motion to correct the minutes to include the correct name of the organization.
Motion to correct the
Ms.
minutes.
Pacheco, thank you. Who's going to second that? Ms. Olagi is going to second that. Go ahead, Ms. Welch.
So is this motion approving the meeting minutes as corrected?
Yes.
Okay.
We're just going to accept the correction at the board level, and then we'll go from there. Is that what you're okay?
And in a second motion, you'll approve them.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you now.
In the second motion, you will approve
Yes,
the
we'll take a
minutes.
second. This is just for the correction.
Thank you.
Okay, is there any further board member discussion on the correction of the proper name of the organization? Seeing none, is there any public comment on the correction of the name of the organization? Seeing none, let's vote on the correction, and then once we have the correction done, we can vote on the corrected minutes. That's what your concern is. Yes, absolutely. So, Dr. Lorin, we have to do a vote on the acceptance of the correction.
Chan?
Chan, aye.
Chan, I. Felsenfeld?
Felsenfeld, aye.
Felsenfeld, I. Forge?
Forge, aye.
Forge, I. Larin, I. McKenzie?
McKenzie, yes.
McKenzie, I. Medina?
Medina, aye.
Medina, I. Molina?
Molina, aye.
Molina, I. Olage?
Olagi, aye.
Olage, I. Pacheco?
Pacheco, aye.
Pacheco, I. You?
Question, I was absent last May. Can I vote on anything?
Okay.
You should abstain.
Yeah, you abstain.
Abstain. Okay, you abstain. We have, the motion passes.
Passed. We now have before us the minutes of the last meeting as corrected. Is there any, and we need a motion on that.
So
Somebody?
moved.
So you can't say so moved, you have to say what the motion is. Who's doing that?
Molina.
Please, Molina, you are moving to
Approve the minutes.
as corrected.
As correct.
Perfect. Who seconds that? I will. How's that? We'll move on. So that's seconded. Is there any further board member discussion on this topic? Seeing none, is there any public comment on this? Seeing none, we are now ready to vote on the acceptance of the corrected minutes. Dr. Lorin, if you'll call the roll.
Chan?
Chan, yes.
Chan, I. Felsenfeld?
Felsenfeld, aye.
Felsenfeld, I. Forge?
Forge, aye.
Forge, I. Larin, I. McKenzie?
McKenzie, yes.
McKenzie, I. Medina?
Medina, abstain.
Medina, abstain. Molina?
Molina, aye.
Molina, I. Olage?
Olagi, yes.
Olage, I. Pacheco?
Pacheco, aye.
Pacheco, I. You?
You abstain.
Abstain. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Motion passes.
Thank you, Dr. Lorin. We now go on to item
right?
number five, excuse me, no, number 4, the board president report. My reports have been very brief lately, and they're going to be brief again today. I certainly continue to talk with Dr. Montez on a regular basis, at least once a week, if not more often as we need to be apprised of what the board is doing and where we're going. But I also have heard from the Department of Consumer Affairs, and I'm very proud to announce that the Dental Board of California just issued the very first temporary license to the spouse of a military person, as in AB 107 that was just passed recently. We are the leaders in the DCA, and we will continue to do that, and hopefully we'll have more of those coming up to help the people who have been transferred here. So that is my report. Is there any board comment on the report? Is there any public comment on the report? It is informational, so we can go on to item number 5, the Executive Officer Report. Dr. Montez, if you'll be kind enough to present your information.
Thank you, Dr. Felsenfeld, and good morning, everyone. As Dr. Feld mentioned, we continue to have weekly calls to keep him apprised of board operations, projects, and issues of note. And I continue again to have calls with the Dental Assisting Council Chair and Co-Chair regarding items. Board leadership continues to meet monthly with the DCA Director, Chief Deputy Director, and Board and Bureau Relations Deputy Director, and this is important to facilitate, again, the communications between the board and the Department of Consumer Affairs, our mother agency, as I like to refer to them. Both our Assistant Executive Officer, Bell, and I attended 2 sunset hearing meetings with Business and Professions Committee staffers and other DCA boards and bureaus who are scheduled for sunset in 2024. We were given the official questionnaire, and staff have been working extremely hard to pull all the data together. As you know, we have a big meeting in October to review that, and I'll talk more about that with agenda item 25 tomorrow. We are actually covering 5 years of data instead of the traditional 4 years because we had the little COVID bypass, so to speak. So we do need to pick up that year that we did not have our hearing. In July, we distributed a listserv notice regarding fraudulent activity that was brought to our attention. So again, we really appreciate our stakeholders letting us know what's going on out there. We actually got the notice out that day, and unfortunately, we did hear some examples of our licensees being impacted by this fraudulent activity. But again, once we heard of it, we got that information out as soon as we could. Also of interest, I met in July with the director, the DCA director, and other healing arts boards to talk about crossover issues with Medi-Spas, and I'll keep the board updated on those types of things. There's just interesting developments with regard to teeth whitening and Botox, which overlaps with our professionals as well. We continue to update our website, and so I encourage everybody to take a peek at that. We're starting at different pages within our website, trying to make them more user-friendly and remove any information that is incorrect, especially references to prior executive officers and so forth. We need to clean up some things. So we're also on track to publish our newsletter in November. So before our November meeting, you will receive our second official newsletter. And then, as usual, our budget, licensing, enforcement, and legislative updates will be coming shortly. Dr. Felsenfeld did mention our first licensee under AB 107. Again, this is very exciting. This dentist is actually from Ohio that's coming here to practice, so we're very excited about that. Staffing updates. We have about 9 vacant positions of our 84. However, most of those include offers that are outstanding or in the selection process. We do have, turnover for, natural promotions, opportunities, things like that. So it's a never-ending process with regard to our personnel. But again, we are filling positions. I do want to point out, though, that our office support positions have been particularly challenging to fill. This is something that is across both the Department of Consumer Affairs and other departments. They are working with our control agencies to look into that because this is an entry-level position for the state, and they're the ones that answer our calls and process our mail and our emails. And so we have about 3 vacancies right now, and that's a lot for the board. And so I want to just use this opportunity right now just to, if you can, encourage applicants to only call or email once on the status of their application. We do have individuals that call every single day and hoping to get a different answer. And what that does is it takes the analysts who are actually processing applications away, their attention away from doing that to have to answer the phone or email and talk to these individuals. We still are processing applications within 4 to 8 weeks. We are trying to do it within 30 days, closer to the 4-week mark. But again, these are pristine applications. If an application comes in with deficiencies, it's going to take longer. So the burden is really on the applicant. So just again, please be patient if you have students, applicants, the individuals that you work with out there, if you can help share that with them. Okay. Also would like to share that our Assistant Executive Officer Bell and I met with the DCA Division of Investigation Deputy Chief Nichols to discuss best practices for tracking investigations. We've been working, as you know, with the Enlightened Enforcement Project. We hope to merge all of this information, again, to strengthen our enforcement division. And we did have a couple more meetings on the Enlightened Enforcement Project, and Ms. Pacheco, the Enforcement Subcommittee Chair, will be providing an update at the November meeting on those project meetings that we've had. With that, I would like to introduce our Sacramento Field Office, our Field Enforcement Office, and the Investigative Analysis Unit. As you know, we have been trying to introduce our staff at various meetings. We had the Complaint and Compliance Unit staff in February. We had our Orange Field Office Enforcement team in Anaheim, and now we get to introduce our Sacramento team. So, Ryan, Mr. Blanian, if you would, you and Olga, I'm not sure who's going to take responsibility here to do some introductions, but I would greatly appreciate it if you would introduce our wonderful team here.
Sure. Good morning, I'm Ryan Blanian.
Push the button down. Thank you, Mr. Blanian.
Good morning, I'm Ryan Blanian. I'm the Enforcement Chief for Northern California in the Sacramento office. I have the Sacramento Enforcement Unit, which is mostly sworn law enforcement personnel, an IAU unit that consists of special investigators who are not sworn peace officers, and our admin staff. So sitting down, you already met Joe Tippins. He's a sworn investigator, a peace officer. Owen, who is another manager, not in our unit, but next to him I have Travis, who is a special investigator. He came to us from a law enforcement career up in the North State. Then you have Juan Fuentes, who is a sworn investigator, and he had a law enforcement career here locally before he came to us. And then I have Taryn Amini. She is our office. Stand up, Taryn. Oh, you are standing up. She's our office tech in the enforcement office. If you call us, she's the one who sends faxes, answers emails, does a lot of the filing for us, so it's very helpful. And she is new with us since March? April 2nd. Next to her is Richard, who is our Inspector 2 in the office. He travels all over the place. We've been putting off a trip to Eureka, and because that's a long trip. So he travels throughout Northern California, does inspections, handles many probation cases for us, and he started with us in February? October?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm batting zero here. I have Matt sitting next to him. Matt is a special investigator here in the Sacramento office. He is doing several investigations right now, has a history of investigating different subjects, so we're happy to have Matt here as well. And then we have Maya, who is pretty new. She's handling the SARs in our office in Sacramento. Those are when licensees get in trouble with the law. We investigate them and determine if we have to take action. So she jumped into it with both feet and is learning a lot, and she can almost talk police dialect with me at this point. So thank you. And then we have Boone. Boone also works the SARs. Boone collects the police records, collects the court records once the case is done. She helps out in the file room as well. There's a big project we're working on there, something they don't teach you in the police academy, but I've had to learn. And we're making progress, and we're happy to have Boone here. And then behind her is Olga. Olga is the supervising special investigator over the IAU unit. She came to us from our Orange office, promoted up. She has a lengthy state history involving investigation, and she and I are working well together and learning our different styles that we have, and I think things are going very well. And behind her, oh yes. We have, she just, Sandy just promoted, I'm sorry. She had worked with the SARs in the past. She just promoted into an AGPA position. She's running stats and doing some probation cases for us and training Maya. So She has had a big couple weeks with running stats and generating reports for us. It's been learning for her, and I learned that I'm glad I'm not generating the reports. So she's been very, very busy, working very hard this week, and we appreciate everything she's done. And I think that's everybody.
Nope, Bernie.
Oh, Bernie. Bernie Vaba, he's a special investigator in our office, handles cases, maybe a couple probation cases still, and he works independently and does a great job for us.
Is that it?
That's it.
You're
Thank
right.
you
Yeah.
very much.
Yeah.
Mr. Blanian, thank
sir.
you. On a personal basis, I want to suggest that if our overarching responsibility is to protect the health of the public, you guys are the initial people are going to go look at enforcement, which is really a very, very important part of what we do, and your work is not unappreciated. So thank you,
Thank you very much.
all of you guys.
And I'm not sure if I had a chance to mention too that Ryan was recently promoted not too long ago. He is Carlos's counterpart. So we have an enforcement chief of North and an enforcement chief of South, and they're doing a fabulous job. And so is the team is just doing a great job. We've had a lot to tackle, as you know, in the past, and they just all seem to work so well together. So I really appreciate it, and they're funny too, so they make some really tough work, able to handle it. So with that, I'm going to just do a very brief strategic plan update, and then we will move on. The board has 4 goals in its strategic plan. Its plan is 2022 to 2025, and these goals include, they're very broad, overarching goals of licensing and examinations, consumer protection and enforcement, communication and customer service, and administrative services. And within each of those goals, there's objectives and action items, and these are just internal to-do lists, projects for board staff to do. And I'm really happy to report that the board has done an excellent job tackling these. There were a number of them that had been completed under the prior administration, and then we've continued moving those forward. And there are still a few items pending, and then there are some items that we may actually never need to do because of changes that are being made, for example, with AB 481 or with some of the agenda items you'll see today regarding the portfolio. And then again, just advancements, things that have happened over the last few years with COVID and things like that. So just to let you know, we are doing very well. One thing that is new, though, that I want to bring to your attention, because I'm sure many of you have either received a survey or will be receiving it ever so shortly, and that is a diversity, equity, and inclusion survey that is being distributed as part of the governor's executive order. So he issued an executive order N1622, which is strengthening the commitment to California for all. And so he is asking all of our agencies to build in these principles in their strategic plan. So since we have a current strategic plan, the department is working with us, specifically Solid, to add some additional information that may help facilitate the remaining objectives that we have. And so a survey was distributed yesterday via our listserv. Our board members and our staff will be receiving a survey shortly on this. It's open until September 13th, so it's only 5 questions. It'll take maybe 5-10 minutes to complete, but we would really appreciate your feedback about how the board can be more inclusive and how we can ensure that we are addressing all Californians. So with that, I will conclude my executive officer report and open it up to any questions that the board may have.
Are there
Thank
any
you.
board member comments or questions for Dr. Montez? Sounds like you've been busy. Is there any public comment? Seeing none, thank you. This is informational. That's Yvonne Durantes, and she's been here before, right? Our next item of business is item number 6, the report on the Department of Consumer Affairs activities, which may include updates on the department's administrative services, human resources, enforcement, information technology, communication, and outreach, as well as legislative, regulatory, and policy matters. I'm going to ask Ms. Yvonne Durantes, you've been here before, welcome back, Ms. Durantes, the DCA Board and Bureau Relations Assistant Deputy Director, to provide this report. Good afternoon, or good morning.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here to provide you with updates.
Could you move that microphone? I am a little congested. I'd like to hear what you have to say. Thank you.
No worries. Are you able to hear me
There you
now?
go, much better, outside voice kind of thing.
Great. All right. Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me here. I do have quite a bit of updates, so if at the end you need me to repeat any of them, I am happy to. So I'm going to go ahead and get started with our DEI update, which during our last quarterly meeting, DCA's DEI Steering Committee held its quarterly meeting and elected a chairperson, which was Yafana Lamar, who currently serves as the department's tribal liaison and is the chief of legislation for the Contractor State License Board. And the vice chair that was elected is Paul Sanchez, who is currently the executive officer for the Speech Language Pathology and Audiology Board. And so the committee also discussed training, strategic planning, and DEI activities throughout the end of the calendar year for 2023. We are currently providing employees with access to DEI training, and we are making it a priority for DEI steering committee to ensure that trainings are available. In June, DCA began offering 3 DEI courses, which are available to all DCA employees. The courses are, number 1, understanding the core value of DEI in the workplace. Number 2, how to decode our unconscious bias and unleash the power of generational differences. Oh, that was actually number 3, unleash the power of generational differences. The response from employees to participate in these new DEI learning opportunities has been significant thus far, with a high registration rate and attendance numbers. The DEI committee is also pleased to announce that an outside consultant, Dr. Bernard Gibson, will provide an in-person DEI training to DCA managers, supervisors, and leaders in October. In addition, Dr. Gibson will provide a virtual training to board members on the morning of October 9th of 2023. And this past Tuesday, board members and your executive officer should have received the invitation for that training opportunity. If you do have any questions in regard to that training or any issues with registering via LMS, please be sure to reach out to Board and Bureau Relations, and we'll be happy to help you with logging in. Dr. Gibson, who will be leading that training, has over 20 years of corporate experience managing teams and training employees in business effectiveness. Dr. Gibson also has extensive teaching experience at various colleges, including serving as an adjunct faculty since 2006 for the University of Massachusetts for School of Business and Professional Studies. And information on registering for this virtual event, like I said, was sent out on Tuesday. If for whatever reason you did not receive it, please also reach out to us and we'll be happy to forward it to you. Moving on to updates on in-person meetings and Bagley-Keene Open Meeting Act. The changes for Bagley-Keene Open Meeting Act that allowed board members to not have to notice their meeting location or meet an ADA accessible location did expire on July 1st, as some of you may know. And so therefore, as of July 1st, all public meetings are subject to the traditional pre-COVID requirements for open meetings. And so DCA boards and bureaus should be ensuring that public meetings are compliant with Bagley-Keene Open Meeting Acts. And so since we are all here, we are complying today. Whether a meeting is held at a single centralized location or at multiple teleconference locations, each physical meeting location will need to be identified in the meeting public notices and agenda. Board members must attend meetings in person at the notice locations. On-notice meeting locations, including locations where a single board member must be ADA accessible. Have an agenda posted and be open to the public. The public will be permitted to attend meetings at any noticed meeting location. And additionally, members of the public need to be able to hear the meeting and participate in public comment at each location. DCA has a Bagley-Keene Open Meeting Act guide available and has provided your executive officer with a list of available meeting locations throughout the state. If you did not receive it or have any questions about the meeting locations, I'm also happy to help with that. And so SB 544, which may allow for some meetings to be held without noticing the locations, thus allowing remote virtual meetings, is still going through the legislative process. The legislature just resumed their session, so it will continue to move through the process. Moving on to military spouse and domestic partners temporary license, as Dr. Fessenfeld said, congrats to your board for being the first to issue a license to a military spouse. Very exciting. And so, as some of you may know, but for those that don't know, DCA has worked to implement AB 107, which was authored by Assemblymember Rudy Salas, was effective July 1st of 2023. And so DCA boards and bureaus, unless otherwise exempt, are required to grant temporary licensure to spouse or domestic partners of active duty military members stationed in California. If the spouse or domestic partner holds a license in another state with the same scope of practice as a profession in California, which they would like to practice. DCA's Office of Information Services and Communications Division have been working to support the implementation. All boards and bureaus were recently provided an outreach kit to help share the message of this new benefit to military spouses. And DCA has also updated its military resources website to reflect this new benefit as well. So I'm sure you are all familiar with it, but again, if you do have any questions or if anything is needed in regard to the webpage, please do let me know. Moving on to the Enlighten Enforcement Project. As some of you mentioned, the department is continuing to work on the Enlighten Enforcement Project that is being piloted by your board. And so you have walked through your intake, complaint process, citation, and investigation processes. And so I guess one more walkthrough session is scheduled to cover the discipline and probation processes. And so thank you for all of your work on that. And I know that other boards will be looking forward to the update as well. Moving on to the data governance project, DCA is continuing its efforts to improve its reports regarding licensing and enforcement activities. The director recently led multiple work groups beginning late April all through July with staff from each board and bureau to update the data metrics reported in DCA's annual report. And so DCA's goal is to ensure consistency between the report data in the annual report, DCA's data portal, and board and bureau's sunset reports. Future meetings are expected in August and ongoing to help build new reports or modify existing ones to provide their new metrics for next year's annual report. Additionally, DCA also held a meeting on July 17th with all boards and bureaus to review guidance on how boards and bureaus can compile and report data to the department for inclusion in this year's upcoming annual report. Moving on to press release translations. To further the department's efforts to reach the Californians we serve, DCA will request that boards and bureaus translate any press releases they issue into Spanish. California's top non-English language spoken is Spanish, and establishing a standard of translating releases into both English and Spanish will enhance the reach of information released. Boards and bureaus are also encouraged to evaluate any additional language outside of Spanish that may serve their audiences. For additional information on this, please do reach out to Board and Bureau Relations. We'll be happy to provide more information. Moving on to onboarding reminders. Board members who have been appointed or reappointed cannot begin in their service or perform any official functions without first taking their oath of office. Unless otherwise provided, the oath must be taken before an officer authorized to administer oaths. Board members should contact their executive officer to arrange taking the oath of office. Board members will be required to complete the documents listed on the Board Member Appointment Checklist, or HR 15, and return them to the Office of Human Resources no later than 30 days after their appointment or reappointment. And duties cannot be assumed and appointments cannot be processed until those documents are received and accurately completed. Incomplete packets may delay per diem payments and travel reimbursements due to the member. And I do also want to add to please be sure that if anything is emailed, please be sure that it's a PDF document or something equivalent. HR often does not accept pictures, so just another reminder. Moving on to required board member trainings reminder, which comes after onboarding. This year, there are 2 DCA-wide mandatory trainings for 2023, and this includes sexual harassment prevention training and information security awareness. And so all DCA employees and appointees, including board and advisory committee members, will need to complete the sexual harassment prevention training by the end of this year. Board members must take the 2-hour supervisory training, and this training is required every odd-numbered year. It's online and it's approximately 2 hours. And so, additionally, any board members that do have a DCA assigned email are also required to complete the Information Security Awareness Fundamentals training, and this training addresses everyone's role in protecting DCA data and information. This training is also available via our learning management system. And so, again, if you have any questions or issues logging in, I'm happy to help. Moving on to travel reminders, just want to make a quick note. Please keep in mind that all state travel arrangements must be made through DCA's authorized travel agency, Cal Travel Store, or Concur. And when traveling by air on official state business, all board members and staff must use their most economical fares possible. If flights are changed, there may be additional charges. Flight changes for personal convenience are not permitted or justified, and the traveler is also responsible for any associated charges. Lastly, just want to give a quick update on the 2023-2024 out-of-state travel notices. So the Attorney General recently issued a press release adding 3 new states to California's restricted travel list. And so the effective dates are staggered, beginning with Wyoming being added to the list effective July 14th, Missouri being added to the list effective August 28th, and Nebraska being added to the list effective October 1st. And so if you have any questions, please reach out to either your executive officer or Board and Bureau Relations. And then also just wanted to give a quick plug, and I think many of you who are required to take BMONT in the next year should have received an invitation for the upcoming BMONT session that will be October 10th. It will be virtual. The dates for 2024 and the logistics as to whether they will be in person or virtual have not been set, so we encourage you to sign up and take advantage of this virtual opportunity in October. And if you have any questions, please reach out to BBR. At this
Thank you, Mr.
moment,
Rantes.
thank you so much.
Are there any board questions or comments for Mr. Rantes? Very thorough report, thank you. If not, is there any public comment on her report? Seeing none, thank you very much. We
Great.
appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks for bearing with me.
Okay. We're going to move on now to item 7, our budget report. Mr. Rombaugh, would you join us and tell us a little bit about how we're doing financially?
Can you hear me okay, Dr. Felsenfeld? Good morning, board members. My name is Wilbert, and I'm the admin manager with the General Board of California. I'll be presenting the budget report, which can be referred to pages 44 through 49 of your meeting materials. The materials provide substantial information on the board's budget, both revenue and expenditures, and the projected fund balance moving forward. I would like to highlight some of the information provided and ensure that you have clarity on them. On page 47, regarding the board's fund condition, it's going to be the board's fund condition statement. The board began fiscal year 22-23, which is also labeled prior year, with an adjusted beginning balance of 13.5 million. The board collected approximately 18.8 million in revenue and expended approximately 17.8 million in direct expenditures. There were additional statewide expenditures of 1.7 million for a total expense of 19.5 million for the board. The board is projected to end fiscal year 22-23 with just over 15.8 million in reserve balance. You will also see there is a 8.9 months in reserve. Months in reserve is the amount of time the board can continue normal operations without any new incoming revenues. A healthy program is considered to have at least 6 to 12 months in reserve. Based on the reports received by the DCA Budget Office, the board is projected to revert approximately $1.7 million by the end of 22-23, and that information can be found on page 49 of your meeting materials. It also goes over all the detail of expenditures from general expenses, personnel, and technically enforcement and admin costs as well. For the beginning of fiscal year 23-24, as of June 27th, SB 101, Budget Act of 22-23 was passed. The starting point for the Dental Board of California for revenue is going to be 18.8 million, and the expenditures are 20 million for the board. There are no action items on this agenda item, and this concludes the budget report. At this time, I will answer any of your questions.
Dr. Chan.
Dr. Chan.
Good morning.
Morning.
Question number one, the legal costs of the lawsuit against the dental board comes out of our budget. Have we received billing on that yet?
Yes.
Okay, and
So we, in addition to AG expenditures, the contract for the vendor that we did services for that suit have been added to the expenditure projection. And it was initially amended because there are some additional expenses, but that has been included in the report.
thank you. The second question is it of merit, maybe through the executive officer, is it of merit to cite the unrecoverable investigation fees, the ones that we can't recover? Investigation from the Attorney General and things like that?
I can certainly look into that. There are some fees that we are keeping track of, and the extent of those I can look into.
Okay, thank you. That's it.
Are there any other board member questions? Dr. Larin.
Thank you for your report. I just had a question. Does the state dentistry fund budget include any revenue for committee projects that might be coming up? Or how does the committee work without any funding?
So in terms of the board's budget, this is the entire budget as of July 1st, 2023. There will be an adjustment as of most likely the end of December, but that will be released on January 10th for any additional expenses that weren't accounted for.
So do you have to request it, or how does it work?
So typically, in conjunction with Department of Finance, the board reviews the budget current expenditures and any particular legislation that has come out, and particular AG and OH costs, and determine if there's any need for a change
Okay.
or adjustment.
I'll ask you later a little bit more. Thank you.
Go ahead, Dr. Mendez.
So, Dr. Loren, can you give us an example of maybe what you're thinking?
Well, for example, I was referring to my committee, the Access to Care Committee. If we wanted to do a project or work with staff, we might need additional, hours for staff or interviews or send out surveys. How was that funded?
So, everything that you'll be doing with staff is accounted for, in terms of, everything is accounted for in terms of, you working with staff time. Dependent on the outreach, we are able to work with the department to get certain resources, but we cannot go over our allocation for the year, typically.
And if you need more, you would request it for the next year? Is that how it works?
Dependent on what it is, there's the mechanism called a budget change proposal where we can request for additional resources dependent on the need. But we would have to show that there is a need.
Okay. Thank you, appreciate it.
Yeah, so I would just suggest any time you have a project as a subcommittee, just to bring it to my attention and we can work with you, unless it's a pretty significant change, project, legislative change. It's very difficult to get additional funding, so we have to work within our resources as explained, utilizing staff and then the various authorizations that we already have. But it, again, usually takes legislation in order to get a significant budget change proposal through.
Are there any other board member questions? Seeing none, is there any public comment on the budget? Seeing none, Mr. Rambara, thank you. We're good. We're going to move on to item 8A. It's enforcement and review of statistics and trends. Mr. Alvarez, welcome back.
Thank you, Dr. Felsenfeld. Board members, Carlos Alvarez, Enforcement Chief for the Orange Office. I'll be presenting on agenda item 8, which is our statistics. And our statistics that I'll be presenting is through April 1st through June 30th. And I'll kind of just touch on the highlights here. And some of the highlights here is with our complaint and compliance unit. Again, they're doing a really great job with the cases that are with the unit. As you can see, the 1 to 2 years plus cases, we have 0 cases in that unit, which is really great. The 6 to 12 months, again, CCU is reducing those complaints that are sitting there, avoiding case aging. And so what CCU does is they run reports every 2 weeks for case aging. That goes to an analyst, and they're doing more consistent follow-ups where it allows them to reduce the cases in the complaint and compliance unit. So a really good job there. As far as our enforcement units, from our last report that I provided, we have reduced the investigated cases, so we reduced it by 64 cases. So a really good job with both of our offices, Sacramento and Orange. So when we close these cases out, there were no errors, they either were issued administrative citations or they went to the Attorney General's office. And for another highlight here is with our number of inspections in our Orange County office. The last report that I provided, we had 80 open inspections, and we reduced that by half. So currently, right now, there are 40 inspection cases in Orange County. So again, a really good job right there with our Orange County office and doing inspections there. So that kind of concludes my report here. I know it was kind of short, but I touched on the highlights. Anybody have any questions?
Let's see if there are any questions or, again, it seems that the efficiency of this office is getting better and better by the quarter. And that's excellent. We obviously get a lot of complaints. That's unfortunate, but we're getting them into the system and out of the system as quickly as we can. So that's good. Any
Thank
other
you.
board comments on that? I'm sorry, Dr. Chan, thank you.
I also wanted to compliment on the execution of the cases also. Question, maybe again through the executive officer, is it appropriate and is it of value to break out the statistics of dentists versus RDAs in terms of enforcement?
I think that's, we can do that. To get a little bit more detail, yes,
It's two different
Right.
arenas in there.
right.
The other element may go into the second part of 8B, but having briefing on what the probation costs to the probationer could be of value to new people too, coming on the board.
Any other board comment on this report? Dr. Lerin?
Hello.
Hello.
Carlos. Yeah, I want to ask you, is this right here, what you sent, are those the slides that you presented at the LA County Dental Society?
So,
meeting?
That's coming next.
Oh.
Yeah, that's coming next.
Oh, that's
So
not
this
this
is actually a shorter version, this one here.
Oh, that's the next one.
You'll see it.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Is there any public comment on the data that's been presented so far? If not, I think, Mr. Alvarez, you're next. You're going to show how the
Next.
process works, and I know that you did a presentation, you and I talked about this, you did a presentation at LA, and we talked about that too, and I have
Yes.
some of those slides, and so that's what we're going to do next. So how do we get that going?
That will be coming up shortly. Morella is bringing it up. And again, I just really want to thank the Complaint Compliance Unit and the Enforcement Division, because there's so much time that goes into a case. It is not an easy process. Everybody gets due process of when the complaint gets in, the information that has to be requested, the authorizations. It's a very methodical process, and the team works extremely hard. They have about 30 cases that they're working on and juggling in terms of information, and they're just doing a fabulous job. And then on top of that, they have our assistant executive officer and myself saying, okay, guess what? This is new and we need to standardize it. And oh, how about this? And let's change that and participate in this meeting. And so in addition to just doing their duties, they're accommodating us to make improvements. And so I just, again, really want to reinforce how much we appreciate them utilizing their law enforcement expertise and investigative analysis to do this. And again, this presentation that Carlos is going to make, Mr. Alvarez, is abbreviated version, but it was something that the board had asked for. And so we wanted you to have this. So thank you very much.
This presentation is a good orientation and a reorientation to those of us who look through these cases all the time and to get a sense of where did this come from, how come it's here, how come it's there, and I think that's going to be great. So, Mr. Alvarez, if you'd like to show that, and then we can take some additional comments from the public and from you.
Put on next slide.
Is that Maximus, that her sitting on that front on the left? Okay. She was very long.
On the mission
Why don't we
statement.
stop here for a break for lunch and we'll explain to her in an hour. Okay. Because we're this will take a little.
You go
this
to
is
the
only
mission
thing that's
statement.
gonna have any kind of grease with later on. No, that's the one guy, that's the guy.
Okay. So again, I'll be presenting again on the enforcement program here at the Sacramento and the Orange office. So the very first thing is our mission statement. You're probably all aware of our Mission statement that the Dental Board of California's mission is to protect and promote the health and safety of the consumers of the state of California. And how do we do that? It's by licensing, reviewing applications, licensing those individuals that qualify and issue a license. And as far as the enforcement, how we protect them is by conducting investigations. With the vision statement, Dr. Fenselfeld kind of touched on that how, we are the leaders. The Dental Board of California will be the leader in public protection, promotion of oral health, and access to care. And again, we kind of did that by issuing the first temporary license with, military spouse. So that's how we become the leaders there. So within our enforcement program, we have 4 units on our enforcement program. So we have the Complaint and Compliance Unit, which we refer as CCU. And I just keep saying this from the very beginning when I started. This is one of the most important units that we have because everything starts there with the CCU. We have the Inspections and Probation section. Then we have our Investigation Unit, which is comprised of sworn investigators. So with the sworn investigators, we have gone to a police academy. We have certification from the California Peace Officer Standards and Training. And so what we have is we have the authority to make arrest. Then we also have our non-sworn, which is our civilian unit, which is our investigative analyst unit, which we refer to IEU. And then we have our discipline coordination unit, DCU. So like I say, all these units are important to our enforcement program because without one, we won't be able to function and move on to the next process. Okay, with our complaint and compliance unit, what again we refer to as CCU, is CCU receives approximately 4,000 complaints a year. And like I said, that's a lot of complaints that they receive, and that's a lot of complaints that our analysis have to enter in the system. They review it, they analyze the complaints. And so the type of complaints that we receive are subsequent arrest reports, which we refer to as SARS. We receive insurance settlements through the National Practitioners Data Bank. And then we also get reports of hospitalization or deaths that come through CCU. So they process all of the complaints that are coming in. They enter it on our system. And so what they do is they'll receive all the correspondence and they'll send out for records requests. That goes through, that comes in. They compile all the information for our dental consultants. So our dental consultants review the cases, and then they'll opine whether they need further investigation. And so what they do is then they'll go ahead and process those cases to investigations. So anybody could file a complaint. If it's within 1670, quality of care, 1680, unprofessional conduct, and consumers could file complaints, insurance companies could file complaints, and also dental practitioners. Usually, we get these questions, can dental practitioners submit a complaint, and could they be anonymous? And that's yes. Anybody has that right, even consumers, to file a complaint anonymous. And also, we get complaints from other law enforcement agencies as well. So the most common reasons for complaints that we receive is when consumers are unhappy with treatment that they received, which is quality of care. They'll submit a complaint, and again, we'll take a look at those, and that'll go through our process with our dental consultants, our SMEs as well. Substance abuse is when complainants call and they say they believe that the DDS was under the influence. They'll submit a complaint about that. Improper advertising, some of these and examples could be that they went and they said that they were painless. The advertising, you could come in and our office is painless. Well, that's pretty much not true. Or the others are what we call bait and switch, where they advertise for a free consultant. You could go in for a free consultation, you walk back out, and you're paying about $100. So we call those improper advertising, bait and switch. Fraud cases, where they're submitting fraudulent bills, where they're saying that they're providing treatment and they're really not. Sexual misconduct, infectious control, that's where our inspectors go out and inspect the offices when somebody complains that there's a dirty office or they had dirty equipment. False or fictitious name use, or FMPs, and also unlicensed activity is where consumers complain that they went out to a fictitious business, or they went to a dental lab, or they went to a residence, and they received dentistry by an unlicensed person. Complaint compliance unit. So again, I kind of touched this on this. Their role is collecting all the dental records related to the complaint. They collect the dental records from the treating dentist or subsequent treaters. So if a complainant lists that they went to a subsequent treaters, then we'll follow up with those subsequent treaters and collect records as well. So that way, when the dental consultant can kind of review it to say, okay, the treatment that was provided by the treating dentist, and then compare it to what the subsequent treater did, what they observed. So that's some of the things that our dental consultants opine their cases on. So it goes to them, they'll review it, and then they'll make the determination whether there are violations of the Dental Practice Act. So one of their opinions can be that there is no errors. So they could come back and say the treating dentist did everything correctly, there's no errors, those cases get closed. If the consultant determines that there were violations of the Dental Practice Act, then what they do is they recommend that for further investigations, and then that would go to our investigation unit for further investigations. Again, I kind of touched on this. The consultant could sustain that there was no errors, and those cases get closed as unsatiated. That kind of go into our inspection program. So our inspection program, when we have a complainant file a complaint that they went in, they observed that the dental office was dirty, they observed that the dental instruments were dirty, then our inspectors conduct an investigation per the California Code of Regulations 1005, the minimum standards for infection control. And so what they do is when they go in there and inspect an office, they walk in with the checklist of 1005, the minimum standards for infection control. So that's what assists our inspectors going in there and looking and conducting an inspection. So our next one here with the inspection program, and even for our investigations, this is one of the most important sections that we have is Business and Professions Code section 1611.5. Pursuant to a complaint, that's what allows our inspectors and our investigators to go in and conduct an inspection of an office, inspect the books, inspect the records, and conduct an inspection of the office. Again, one of the most important business and professions codes that we have, 1611.5, because that's what gives us the authority. So when a dentist refuses to allow an inspection, the inspector or the investigators provide them with this section, 1611.5. They give them time to review it so they could have an understanding that, yes, we do have the authority to conduct an investigation and conduct an inspection and review all the patient records. If a DDS fails or doesn't allow an inspection, then that is grounds for us to submit a case to the Attorney General's office for unprofessional conduct under 1670. These are very, very few. You know, pretty much when we show them, the inspectors, investigators show to a dental office, they comply. There is very few where they refuse. Then after they provide them with 1611.5, then they'll go ahead and allow an inspection. So again, very important section that we have. So with our inspection program, again, the complaints I just kind of talked about, unsanitary conditions that they'll complain about. They also complain about auxiliary staff working out of scope. You know, we receive sometimes complaints where they say, oh, I went in and I think this hygienist is an RDA, or I think this hygienist is a DA. So that allows us to go in there and inspect and request all the licenses types that there is for that office. Again, failure to file an address change. Again, very important because we might get a complaint and it's for the wrong office. So it's very important that the DDSs are up to date with their address of record. And again, that could be a citation if they're not notifying us of their address of record. Also, working with an expired license. Again, there could be a DDS, very rare that we get that, but a registered dental assistant might be working with expired license, so our inspectors go in there and again, review all licenses that are there at that office. Again, operating with the fictitious name permit or having additional office with no permit. So our inspectors, what can our inspectors do? So our inspectors, once they go in, they inspect the office with our checklist. One of the things that they do is they check off all the violations. So there might be instances where there's no violations, and if there is, what our inspectors do is check off all the violations. They have a meeting with the DDS at that time, and they advise them all the violations and how to correct those violations. And so what we do is we issue them a notice to correct. Our inspectors will go back to our office. They'll write a letter, notice to correct with all the deficiencies, and they have pretty much, we give them 30 days to correct. And also our inspectors write reports. So we have to have facts as to why we're supporting these deficiencies, and we also need a report in case they falter and don't correct the issues here. So again, we allow them to give 30 days to correct, and some of the ways that we allow them to correct this is depending on the violations, is if they need to purchase equipment, we'll allow them to mail in invoices that they purchased the appropriate equipment. Or if it's just licenses that need to be updated, we'll allow them to, give us a printout of Breeze. So that's how some of the things that we do is to, we accept for the notice of correction. A lot of times, depending how egregious the violations are, our inspectors will go back unannounced for a second inspection to make sure that they corrected all the issues there. So one of the things, if they didn't correct the issues, our inspectors do have the authority to issue citations as well. So depending how egregious they are, they can issue a citation for a minimum of $50 for each violation, up to the maximum of $5,000 for each violation. The more egregious cases, or again, the DDS is just refusing to correct all the deficiencies, then again, we have the authority to move those cases to the Attorney General's office for discipline, for unprofessional conduct, for not complying with the notice of correct, and not complying with the minimum standards of infection control. And as you can see here, we have a before picture where our inspectors go and inspect. And as you can see, it's very filthy there. Obviously, you can see that they failed the inspection. And then with the notice of correction, you can see the after, they corrected all the deficiencies there. And so when we walk in and we conduct a second inspection, that's what we want to see, that they're complying with the minimum standards of infection control. So with moving on to our investigations, again, we touched on this, our sworn investigators. We've gone through a police academy. We have certification through POST, and again, we have the authority to execute arrest, execute search warrants. We handle criminal cases, criminal complaints that we receive. Again, fraud is a type of cases that receive, unlicensed cases that we receive. We work those criminally. And we also work administrative filings, and those there are with the like death, hospitalization. Those are the type of cases that we refer to the Attorney General's office. Our civilian investigators, which are in our IEU, they investigate general unprofessional conduct, where there is just general negligence, incompetence resulting in no injury to the patient. So those are the type of cases that our civilian investigators work. So the type of training that our IAU unit, our civilian unit, civilian investigators receive is they'll receive in-house training with more experienced special investigators, or they'll go through a training with our sworn investigators as well. DCA also offers training, and we provide that to our civilian investigators. So they offer investigative techniques, how to write subpoenas, and how to write reports. So those are the type of trainings that our IAU unit receives. So our investigation, what we do. So we're the fact finders. So what we do is we gather all the facts, all the records, and all the evidence. Our training and experience is not on dentistry, so we have to rely with our subject matter experts. So we're just the fact finders for our subject matter experts, or we're just the fact finders as well if for the district attorney's office if we have a criminal case. And so what we do is we interview all parties that are involved. So we interview the complainant, the treating dentist, any staff that was present during the treatment that was provided to the patient. So if there's a parent that went in, they're present when they're providing treatment to the child, they become a witness to that case. So we interview everybody because we want to gather all the supporting facts. What we do is we send those cases, once we finalize all the cases, we have all the facts, we have all the records, we submit those cases to our experts. Our experts carefully review the cases, and then they'll make a determination whether there's violations of the Dental Practice Act or if the treatment they provided fell below the standard of care. So again, we utilize our SMEs, we rely on our SMEs to review our reports. Again, our sworn investigators were able to make arrests, we're able to serve search warrants. So we serve search warrants when we believe that a crime is being committed and we need further evidence to support it. And so if we want to search a residence, we want to search a dental office, we have to have a search warrant signed by a judge, which allows us then to automatically go in, start searching. That allows us to go ahead and open any type of file cabinets, any closets, allows us to go in there and search the computers, it gives us the authority to search everything for more evidence to support a criminal case to the district attorney's office. The other things that we have as the tools.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Is the expert that you're talking about the same as the dental consultants?
No, our experts have different qualifications that make them experts. So they have a unique. So we have experts in different fields. So we have experts in prosthodontists, orthodontists. We have experts who are just general dentists. So we have to. What they do is they apply with our board, and then they provide all their training, all their education, and also, if they've been, they have to mark off they've been a subject of any investigations. So if they haven't been a subject of investigations, we review it with our dental consultants. They have all the proper training, education, then we allow them to be experts for it.
And the dental consultants are dentists?
Our dental consultants are dentists, yes, in different fields as well.
Okay, thank you.
Continue on. So we also have another tool where we serve administrative subpoenas. So we use administrative subpoenas when we cannot get records from the DDS, they're not complying. So what we do is we issue a administrative subpoena, and that pretty much, they have to provide us with the records now, because now that's a legal document, so they have to provide us with the records. Also, when we need, another reason we use administrative subpoenas is when we have a case where we have a death case, we don't have a next of kin that wants to sign off on the patient release forms. They don't have either an attorney, And so all we have now is an administrative subpoena so we could get the records from the patient, so we could conduct an investigation. Again, we issue citations. Some examples is when we don't receive the patient records on time, we issue citations. We issue citations when our expert deems that the case wasn't that egregious. It was just minor treatment issues that they have. We'll issue administrative citations. Then with the most egregious cases, we'll submit those to the Attorney General's office, or if we have a criminal case, we'll submit that to the District Attorney office. So then at the conclusion of the investigations is, again, when send everything off to an SME, they come back, they could opine that there was no violations. The outcomes is that we just close that case. Once it is determined that there was no violations. Now, if there were violations, we transmit those to the Attorney General's office for an accusation. So the outcomes that could result with a hearing or is a public reprimand. That's one of the issues, the outcomes that could happen. They could receive probation at the end, or the most serious, they could get their license revocated, or the DDS can agree to surrender their license. And the outcomes also is, again, we submit cases to the District Attorney's office. That leads us to our Discipline Coordination Unit, we refer to as DCU. So their responsibilities are, once a case is finalized, our investigators request an accusation. We send the whole case to DCU. DCU is then responsible for sending these cases to the Attorney General's office and requesting an accusation. So we have a secured portal that everything is set electronically, and that gets sent to the Attorney General's office. DCU also acts as a liaison with the executive officer and the board, the executive officer of the board, the Attorney General's office, and the respondent or the respondent's attorney. They become a liaison, and basically DCU then goes forward and communicates with our executive officer with any type of settlement, any type of terms. They'll be the liaison with that to communicate with the Attorney General's office. So then there's, in our DCU, there's 3 categories that we have when we send cases to the Attorney General's office. We have an accusation. That's where it's been determined that violations of dental practice have occurred, and we're requesting a hearing, and we title that as an accusation. Then we have our statement of issues, and our statement of issues is when an applicant files for a license, either a DDS or an RDA. We review the application. We kind of review it if they have any type of out-of-state discipline by another board. We review it if they have any criminal convictions within 7 years. If we kind of deem that they're not qualified to have a license, then we'll deny the application. We'll send them a letter advising them that their license had been denied, but within that letter, we also let them know that they have their right to appeal our denial. So that gives them the right to request a hearing with the administrative law judge. And so we prepare the files on that, and we submit those to the Attorney General's office as a statement of issues. So that way we can make a determination, a reference, whether it's an accusation, a statement of issues. Our third is petition to revoke probation, is when a licensee is on probation, they're not complying with their terms or conditions, we have probation violations. So what we do is then we submit those to the Attorney General's office to revoke their probation. So after the case has been referred to the Attorney General's office, there's 3 types of pleadings. So the first one is a stipulated settlement, is the result between the Attorney General's office, our EO, the respondent or the respondent's attorney, is where they kind of negotiated the settlements or the terms, and they kind of conclude that the licensee agrees to it. Then we call that a settlement, stipulated settlement, when all parties agree to it. Then we have a proposed decision, and this is where the respondent either decides to move forward with a hearing, or their attorney requests a hearing. That moves on. The case gets heard by a administrative law judge. Then the administrative law judge is the one who has the final conclusion. So one of the things is within 30 days after the hearing, the administrative law judge can conclude that the licensee will receive probation, or they'll revocate their license. The last type is a default decision, and this is where the respondent had an opportunity to file what we call a notice of defense, or the respondent's attorney. We gave them an opportunity to file a notice of defense. They failed to do that within 15 days, then we automatically get a default. So that default will result in a revocation of a license. And that, so after of an accusation or a stipulated settlement, that would kind of lead on to our probation unit. So this is where licensees have been placed on probation as a result of an accusation, or again, through a stipulated settlement. And probation has been initiated, and it's with a specified term of time and terms. And the most common types is 3 years probation. Those are the most commons that we get. And this is all based on our authority to place somebody on probation. It's through Business Professions Code 1670. So what's the responsibilities of our probation unit? One of the main things that our probation monitors, their role is to help the probationer be successful and passing probation. That is our most important role, and we want them to be successful. So what the probation monitor does, is we guide them, we provide them with quarterly reports, we have phone call meetings with them, we have in-person meetings with them, just to make sure that we're guiding them through success. That's the most important thing that we want, is them to be successful. Again, so each quarter they submit quarterly reports saying, yes, they're updated with their license, they have their address of record is updated, they had any probation violations, so they're just updating it with everything, and our probation monitors confirm that with an in-person meeting or a telephone call. They're following up, our probation monitors are following up with their terms and conditions. Some of the terms could be that they have a supervised practice or a billing monitor. So our probation monitor is following up with their supervisors or their billing monitors. And so again, when a dental probationer violates any type of their orders, they just refuse to comply, then at that time, that's when we submit a petition to revoke probation. But again, we want them to be successful when they get placed on probation. So that's our enforcement program. I know it was condensed, it was short, but I'll be more than happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Are there any board member questions for Ms. Medina?
First of all, thank you, Carlos. Excellent presentation.
Thank
Great overview on what role the Enforcement Division has in this department. I wish I would have had your overview when I started as a board member. It would have been great.
Yeah.
But a couple of questions.
Sure.
One is, use an example of the minimum and maximum fines that you can issue.
Sure.
And you use a $50 and then the $5,000. And I'm just, if you could give like examples of the difference between the two?
Sure. So we don't really have a table that we had set fines for each violation. So it all depends on the egregiousness, how many times that office has been inspected. So if we issue a $50 citation, that might be, for an example, they might not have their licenses posted. So we might issue a citation for $50. The most egregious, we'll issue a $5,000 citation, is for sport testing. If they're not doing sport testing, they don't have any evidence that they're conducting sport testing, that's an automatic citation. And like I said, that could be a $5,000 citation.
Okay. Now, the next question is, how often do you obtain search warrants?
Search warrants they're very minimal when we obtain search warrants, and usually we attain those when we're doing fraud cases. So they're very minimal, but when we want to collect all the evidence, we'll go to the district attorney's office, we'll present our case, and then a judge has to sign off on it. And so they have to sign off and say, yes, you do have enough information to do a search warrant. And what we'll do is we'll go in and we'll start collecting all the patient records. We'll start collecting all the laptops that they may have, any data that they might have. We'll collect all that, and then we'll submit that. Usually we'll use Division of Investigations. They have IT people that can review all the information, but it's very rare that we execute a search warrant.
Thank you.
Any other board questions? Dr. Larin?
Thank you, Carlos, for the
We have everybody
presentation. Now that you mentioned sport testing, how long do you have to keep the results for the sport testing?
You should have 12 months worth
Just 12
of sport testing, yes. So they should be kept in a binder. And so when the inspector goes, that's part of their checklist. That's how they'll go in, they'll ask, and they have to have, for each month that they're doing it, they have to have a record of it.
Thank you. And are there a lot of licensees that are not performing sport testing? Have you found that?
It's very few. Again, the percentages are very few on that. It might be like, I want to say like 1%.
Okay, thank you.
Dr. Forge? Not sure what the sequence is, gentlemen and ladies, but we'll go that way.
Thank you. It's more of a.
Into your microphone, please, Dr. Forge. You didn't miss the beginning. I can't hear very well today, so nice
Can you hear
loud
me
voice.
now? Can you hear me now?
You're doing well, thank you.
Thank you. I found this very interesting and very helpful, and I agree with Ms. Medina. It would have been very helpful when I started the board, with the board. But I wanted to know, I know you gave this to LA Dental Society. Are you planning to present this in to other societies? Because I think this is important information, particularly for young dentists that are now graduating from school and may not have this information, and it kind of maybe will help them in starting in their practices.
Yeah, the only ones that have contacted is the LA Dental Society, but other societies are more than welcome to contact us and would be more than happy to do a presentation for them.
Are you willing to do it for schools too?
Yes, of course. In the past, we've done it for UCLA and USC.
Okay.
Dr. Yu?
Yeah, thank you, Carlos, for a very nice presentation, very informative. And I think it'll be really helpful to the dental school and also for dental society. So probably I will try to mobilize the Bay Area, San Francisco Dental Society, or maybe UOP to make some contact.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Dr. Chan, and then Dr. Medina.
Excellent, Carlos, really excellent. We heard from Dr. Forge and Ms. Medina. The concept of onboarding has taken hold in management and governance systems. It's a formalized way of learning how things work. So through the executive officer, could we consider having this as part of the onboarding for the 5 vacancies that are coming in? It's different than the board BMOT. We go through this, we have no clue what they're talking about or how things work. But maybe as an internal function within the board itself to consider a formalized onboarding. So that's the first thing. The second piece is the request to having this available to dental societies and dental schools. In communications, when you have a good product and you know you have a good product, it's about the distribution channels. The distribution channels include, yes, maybe the dental schools and maybe the dental societies, but you also have ethnic societies also out there. You also have consumer groups out there. This is a good template to do the messaging out there. So the distribution channels are another venue. You have a great product in here, and it's a communication product. It's the social groups in the area too. It's the, consumer or the commerce groups out there also. The third area is consider having this in our Sunset Review. This is a good template to share with the other boards of healing arts of how we do our work. It's how you communicate it. Let's see. So through DCA also, it's a great template. It's a great template to maybe mimic out there. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Chair. And Dr. Medina.
Molina.
Sorry. Sorry.
That's okay. I totally agree with what you're saying, and I would even go a step farther and suggest that maybe we can put it in our website so that if someone is asked.
Dr. Molina, it is in the website.
The-
I was going to announce that. This is in the website under the board package for today. So if anyone wants to review this outside of here today, public members particularly, because we have it all on our, it is on the website.
Great.
Thank you. Any other board comment? Any public comment on Mr. Alvarez's presentation? Dr. Montez? Yes.
So this is great feedback. I appreciate it from the board members. I took lots of notes, and I think that including something like this in Sunset is important because it will cost us money to do this outreach. And of course, we know how important it is to keep track of our funds and so forth. So thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Alvarez. We're going to do one more session, and then we're going to break for lunch, because we've been up here since most of the day here, most of us. So, Mr. Dudley, if you want to come forward and talk a little bit about the diversion program report and statistics. Owen Dudley is the Chief of Regulatory Compliance and Discipline, introduced earlier by Mr. Alvarez, or his team, I should say. And welcome back, Mr. Dudley.
Thank you, Dr. Felsenfeld. Good morning. Good morning, Dr. Montez, members of the board. My name is Owen Dudley, and I am the Chief of Regulatory Compliance and Discipline. I'm here to present Agenda Item 9A, which is the Diversion Program Report and Statistics. This memo provides the statistics for the quarter ending on June 30th, 2023. These statistics reflect the participant activity within the diversion program. There were 7 participants in the program. Of the 7 continuing participants, there are 3 self-referrals, 3 probation referrals, and 1 enforcement referral. The next diversion meeting is scheduled for October 4th, 2023. In the meeting materials, I've also provided responses to questions that were asked at the last board meeting regarding prescription positive drug tests and diversion program costs. Prescription positive drug tests can come up when a participant has a known prescription that could be for things like a pain management program that they're already on and that they come into the program knowing. And as long as these are declared and the positive tests are only for the prescription that is on file, it's not considered a violation of the program, and they are categorized differently than other positive drug tests that would be a violation of the contract the participant has. And the other question was about the annual cost of the diversion program to the board. It does vary year by year. Over the last several years, it's been between $30,000 and $40,000 annually. Part of it varies by number of participants. We are charged by participant for their participation. And then another factor over the last few years is that when we weren't holding in-person meetings, the cost was reduced because we weren't paying for the committee members to do the traveling, and that also affected their per diems that they would claim in association with their committee activities as well. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Are there any board member questions for Mr. Dudley? Seeing none, is there any public comment on the report? Dr. Montez.
So, at the risk of putting Mr. Dudley on the spot, he knows what I'm going to tell him. This is his last board meeting with the board. He is leaving us for an incredible promotional opportunity with, I'm going to call it his home department that he has a relationship with. But I want to thank him so much on behalf of the board staff and board members, because I've known Owen for quite some time, and I was thrilled when he came over to the board. And as you can see by his presentations and follow-up with questions, he made sure to respond to the questions that were brought up, followed through, did the research for me. And I'm only letting him leave because I talked to his chief, and she's going to treat him very well and appreciates the skill set that he's bringing. So I just wish him the best, and I wanted to share this with you because it's with mixed emotions that he is leaving. But I'm very happy, so congratulations, Owen. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Dudley, there was no public comment. We're going to take a break now. I know it's, we've been sitting here for a long time. It is 12:35. We will resume at 1:40. I'm going to give us an hour and 5 minutes, extra 5 minutes today. 1:40 for our board meeting. Thank you. Thank you and welcome back. We're going to resume our board meeting at this point, and we'll start with a very patient lady. We have a presentation on Maximus by Virginia Matthews, and if you'll come up, Ms. Matthews, and tell us what you do and how we're doing, we'd appreciate that. And thanks again. And speak up. I'm still deaf. It's still not helping any. It was hot outside. It didn't melt anything.
How's that?
Perfect,
Good.
thank you.
Okay. I am going to kind of sit sideways here.
And I'd like to share with the board members if they'd like to move their chairs or come sit in the audience, however they'd like to move to be able to see the screen, please do so.
Okay, it's a challenge to get everybody after lunch with your postprandial drowsiness, so I'm going to try to keep it interesting for you here. And also to follow Carlos's presentation, but this is your kinder, gentler side of enforcement. So I'm going to try to hold your interest while we tell you what we do in the recovery program, or is formerly known as diversion program. So I'm Virginia Matthews, and I prefer to be called Ginny, so please call me Ginny. And I'm the project director of the Maximus program. I'm going to have to try to keep up with my screen here. Maximus is a for-profit company, and we're the contractor with the Department of Consumer Affairs, and we work with 8 licensing boards through the Department of Consumer Affairs. So they're listed here, but you can see that they're the Board of Nursing, Osteopathic Medical Board, Veterinary Board is the smallest that we work with, Physician Assistant Board, Dental Hygiene Board, which spun off and started its own entity a few years ago, and we have yet to have any participants fall under the Dental Board since they became a board of its own. California State Board of Pharmacy and Physical Therapy Board. So those are the 8 boards that we work with, but the contract actually sits with the Department of Consumer Affairs. And each of the boards has its own set of board-specific requirements unique to each board, and then we have a general set of requirements that fall under the general contract. So we can have unique and specific terms for each of the boards. So if the board has, for example, the dental board has a requirement, the program is 5 years in length. And so that's a specific requirement for the dental board that the other boards don't necessarily have. So if you don't take anything away from my talk today, I want you to take away that we recognize the disease model of addiction. And it's important because it's so easy to get frustrated if you have someone in your life who has a substance use disorder, if you've worked with anyone or known anyone who has the disease of addiction, it's easy to get frustrated to focus on the behavioral aspects of the disease. And it's easy to forget that this really is a disease of the brain, and it's a chronic relapsing disease. And the disease impacts the reward, motivation, memory, and the related circuitry of the brain. But what you see is the behavioral aspects of it. And so we, as people dealing with an individual with this disease, are dealing with those pieces of it, and we forget. And it's easy to get caught up in that. And so the big takeaway, and what I want you to remember, is that we're dealing with a very serious brain disease, and dealing with the behavioral aspects of it is what we're trying to work with to keep people safe. And our primary mission in this program is public safety. And we reflect the primary mission of the board, which is protection of the public. So the dysfunction in these circuits in the brain leads to those characteristic changes that you see, the biological, psychological, and social and spiritual manifestations, those kinds of changes that you see that can be so frustrating for both the individual afflicted by this disease and also those around him. And the individual pathologically pursues reward and/or relief by the substance that they use, or sometimes behaviors. So you can also see gambling behaviors, sexual behaviors, other behaviors that are addictive behaviors. We primarily deal with substance use disorder, alcohol and drugs, but you could remember that there are other addictive behaviors that reflect those same reward responses in the brain. Oops, I went the wrong way there. So the ASAM is the American Society of Addiction Medicine, and the ASAM definition of addiction says that addiction is characterized by that inability to consistently abstain, an impairment in behavioral controls, cravings, and the diminished recognition of the significant problems of their own behavior and their own interpersonal relationships. So that recognition, that's that denial that is, trendy kind of referred to, but that's really the definition of that is that inability to recognize it within themselves, their own behaviors, and a dysfunctional emotional response. So like other chronic diseases, it involves cycles of relapse and remission. So it's a chronic relapsing disease. And without treatment or engagement in recovery activities, it's progressive and can result in disability and death. And we often don't think of substance use disorder as being a terminal illness, but it also can result in death, and it's important to recognize that as well. So the spectrum of addiction is, I keep going the wrong way on my laptop. The spectrum of addiction is to recognize that it's a relationship, the relationship of the person with their substance or their behavior. And that's the real issue, is their relationship to their substance. And this is a complicated chart, and it looks a little bit confusing at first, but this is one of my favorite slides. And I know it's kind of hard to see because it's tiny, but I'm going to ask you to take a moment to take a look at it. So the green line is an individual's baseline. Think of that as normal, but that's the baseline. So it's sometimes easier to think of this as someone, maybe high school or college kids, because this is where people really kind of start experimenting, and this is where you see it. And sometimes it's easier to kind of frame it in that perspective. But think of someone that you might know that went through this, or when you were younger, when you were going through that, you knew people going through it. Those early years, that stage one is that experimental stage. They're learning that alcohol or drugs, how they work, what they feel like, what it's like to control the degree of mood swing. And very often they can't control it. There's difficulty in telling how much they can drink at any one time, or wanting to really feel that excessive high or that excessive emotional boost that they get from whatever that substance is. And that intoxication is perceived as freedom, or freedom from their stresses, freedom from whatever it is that they're dealing with in their lives. And it gets added to their list of priorities in their life, but they still have their normal list of priorities. So if they're working, if they're going to school, whatever's happening in their lives, they still have their family, their friends, their work or their studies, whatever it might be, and their normal list of activities. And the substance or the drug is kind of added on to that list of priorities. And they're going about their normal lives. So that's that stage one kind of experimental stage. But stage two, it begins to move into a more routine use. It becomes more frequent. This is where it starts to become a part of the activity before, so that preloading time, that pregame time, that parking lot, what's it called when you're tailgating? Thank you. That tailgating time. So that using before the activity, or they can't see themselves going to an activity without including alcohol as part of the event. I was just talking to my son about this the other day, and he was saying how has some friends that they couldn't think about going to a movie without going out for cocktails first. I mean, it just had to be part of the event. They had to include alcohol as part of the event. They went to see Barbie, and they just had to go go out drinking first. So it's that they start to learn, though, that there are negative consequences, and they start to learn that there's an increased tolerance. So they start then to sort of challenge each other on how much they can drink or how much they can use and what their tolerance might be. And they start building a tolerance to the substance. And that's a natural body's response to it. Your body begins to develop a tolerance. And this is where they might get their first DUI. And then their priorities begin to shift, and they may then shift and find new friends because they're finding friends that are more interested in using the substance, or that match their interests and are interested in involving the substance. And their families begin to drop off a little bit. School or job becomes a little less important, and sports and getting the substance are still on their list, but other things are beginning to become a little less important. Stage three, and if you look at those curves there on the top, you'll notice that it changes a little bit. So you're now a little bit below baseline at the start. You're not getting quite as high with your use as you used to because you've developed a tolerance. It's not quite the same. And you crash a little bit lower after the use and coming back up to baseline. So there's a change in that. It just doesn't go up and come back down to baseline, but that shift in the use and the response to the use. Stage three is getting into that abuse stage where there's very frequent use. They begin to see a loss of control. This is where you start to hear people say, oh, I can quit anytime. And then they try, there's that dry January, and they don't make it through the month because there's a wedding that came up, or there's some special event that came up, and I intended to stay dry in January, but there was a special event, and so it was important to join my friends and to go do it, or Super Bowl came up, or whatever it was that they had planned, and so they couldn't make it through the month without staying dry. Well, if you can't hold to yourself promises, then there's a reason that you're not able to maintain that sobriety, and it's something worth looking at. There's a reason for it. So there's that loss of control. Their values are changing. They're beginning to get disappointed in themselves, and their self-rules are being broken. They become defensive, and so this is when their family members and friends begin to challenge them a little bit on it, and that defense comes up, and they begin to argue and become defensive with those that are close to them because they don't really, they're starting to see it in themselves, and so they don't want to hear it from those that are close to them, and so it opens up those defenses. And they begin to feel bad about themselves, and there's a preoccupation with the substance or the behavior. I mean, because I'm not just talking about drinking, but it can be about a substance, or it can be about sexual addictions or gambling addictions or whatever else it might be. Any of those might fit into this model. And their lifestyle starts to change, and then their priorities start to change. And so this priority becomes getting the substance or engaging in the behavior. And the family and friends and other priorities begin to fall off. And that substance becomes more important, or that behavior becomes more important. And their baseline begins to drop to a much lower level. And their enjoyment is not as what it used to be. They don't get what they used to get from it. And stage 4 in the addiction is that they feel like they're using to survive. And I've had many of our participants tell me it feels like they're just trying to breathe. They're just trying to use it to get oxygen. It's not to get high. It's not to get this enjoyment out of it anymore. It's just to survive. It's just to make it through the day. There's just to feel normal. They feel a lack of self-control, a lack of self-esteem, so they begin to lose that confidence in themselves. But the behaviors that you see in response to that are the behaviors that those around them find so difficult to manage and so difficult to deal with, because you're seeing those defenses and you're seeing that anger strike out because they're trying to protect their own behaviors and protect the use, but they're not happy with themselves, but they feel a real need to protect it. So what you're getting in response is this striking out at the people that they love because they're trying to protect and put a shell up around themselves and protect their use. And so their priorities change. And the priorities just become getting the substance and getting more and surviving and just making it through the day. And you'll see that their baseline is low, and just getting to normal is all that they are trying to hold on to. I'm going to pause right there and see if you have any questions, because this is a really complicated chart, and I know that that was a lot to hit you with. Sure. I didn't get the second question. The first question was, since the legalization of marijuana, are we seeing an increase in use? We are, and we're seeing we treat it like alcohol. It's legal, but it's not permitted in the program because our program is based on abstinence. So alcohol's legal too, but you can't work and drink alcohol. You can't work and smoke marijuana. So it's not permitted. But can you repeat your second question? Mm-hmm.
And we use acupuncture to treat patients that the drug abuse for the withdrawal syndrome. And it helps out a lot. So wonder whether your program ever considered that.
We don't refer people to acupuncture, but we would be open to it. And if they came to us and were interested in using it for a treatment, we would support it. We don't provide treatment. So what we do is we oversee the treatment and receive reports from the treatment providers. And I'll go into that a little bit more as I talk about the program and how it works. Okay. Any other questions or concerns? Did I need to repeat that question for purposes of the?
I think you're okay for right now.
Okay, okay. Substance use disorder, as I mentioned, it's a disease process, strong genetic influence. We know that. That's the research shows it. It's a chronic relapsing brain disease, comparable relapse rates to diabetes, cardiac disease, or asthma. So another important point that I want you to remember, long-term, sometimes permanent changes in brain chemistry. This is the response to dopamine, serotonin. These are those responses to the pleasure centers in the brain. And so that's what you're seeing, stronger than pretty much anything else that your brain can receive that triggers those dopamine responses are the responses that come from the drugs that people are using, or those triggers that they're getting from their behaviors. And we know from the NIDA the National Institute of Drug Abuse, that the relapse rates between drug addiction and other chronic illnesses, it's comparable to other chronic relapsing diseases. So drug addiction is 40 to 60% of relapse rates, and type 1 diabetes, hypertension, asthma, they're all in that 60% range. So it's right in there. Again, I'm stressing this is a chronic relapsing disease. I want you to get your mind away from that character flaw, that these are bad behaviors. Yes, they're behaviors, but they're behaviors because this is a brain disease. And I'm going to stop harping on that for you, but I just want to make sure that you take that away. Health professionals have about the same risk as other individuals in the community. 10 to 14% roughly is about what the general population has, and healthcare professionals somewhere in the 14 to 20% range. You have to remember that healthcare professionals have access to different drugs than what the general population has, especially dental professionals. They have access to some of the more pure or controlled substances that the general population doesn't necessarily have access to. And I want to hit on another key point, which we know that that's a 60 to 70% relapse rate, but in our program, we have measured a 12% relapse rate in 5 years in the program. And we believe that's because of the monitoring and the support that you get in our program. So, we keep a tight watch, and we do drug testing, and we provide support and coaching and counseling. And so our relapse rate is, and that's true of really programs across the country. It's not just us, we're not special, but it's the fact that we provide that level of support in the program. So relapse rate is much lower for an individual in a program like ours. Healthcare professionals are susceptible to substance use disorders for 2 reasons: is attitude and accessibility. Outwardly focused, anybody in healthcare is trained to focus on the patient. We're reluctant to identify that we have a problem. There's a lot of shame and denial, even more so than in the general public. It's a high-stress job. There was one time, and I'm sure you've all heard this statistic, it's been a few years since I heard it, but the dentists have a very high rate of suicide. Again, it's a high-stress job. And there's a belief that drugs and alcohol are okay to use to cope. And so we want to, get away from that cultural norm of let's go out after work and let's go to a happy hour and close the office and everybody let's go together. That attitude about medications, especially dentists, they handle powerful substances every day. They have the ability to prescribe. They see the effects and they become insensitive to the power of these medications. They forget that although they're using them daily, and especially if they're using them in a surgical setting, when you see them in normal daily use, you forget the power of these medications and what power they have to be misused. And they're accessible, as I said, they're often poorly controlled, especially in an office settings. Narcotic waste may not consistently be followed, and it's easy to divert waste. And it's easy to make prescriptions for yourself or for others or for family members. So to recognize diversion in healthcare settings, so in the office, and we'll provide this kind of training when we speak to facilities or to schools or otherwise out to the public, but we talk about recognizing changes in drug ordering or administering patterns, coming into the office when the office is closed at odd hours or on their days off, coworkers noticing odd behaviors, such as being in the bathroom for long periods of time, leaving the office to go to their car. We've had a lot of incidents of people using in their car and being found asleep in the car, taking longer than normal lunch breaks, missing patient appointments because they don't come back from lunch, complaints from families and patients that the patient's not getting relief from their pain meds. So maybe in the procedure in the office and the medication they're using in the procedure is not effective. It may be because they've replaced the medication with saline. It happens probably more in hospital settings than it probably does in dental offices, but it's certainly a possibility in the office as well. I mentioned the mission of the recovery program is to protect the public and to return the healthcare professionals to safe practice through intervention and rehabilitation. And our program is a program for healthcare professionals who are suffering from substance use disorder and, in some cases, mental illness. There's statistics show about 60% of people with substance use disorder have a co-occurring psychiatric issue as well. So we work with people with both. And try to identify whether the behavior is a psychiatric issue, substance use disorder, or a combination of the two, or if one is caused by the other. And we're a monitoring program, and we provide ongoing support and case management. I'm trying to keep you guys awake. I see eyes drooping over there. I'm trying to hold you together. Should I make everybody stand up and stretch? Everybody wave your hands for me. Come on. I'm going to have to pass. That'll make you sleepier. I'm going to have to pass something else out here. Most healthcare professionals do not self-refer. Again, it comes back to that shame, that rationalization, that denial. They think that, it can't happen to them. They think the consequences of the drug use are horrible for their lives. It's going to take away their license. They'll never see it again. There's that fear of the board and what's going to happen to them. They don't know that our program exists. They see us as connected to the board and their fear of enforcement. So there's too much fear of what might happen if they get involved with our program. And they don't know that our program is confidential. Although when Owen spoke, he said 5 of the participants, a majority of the participants in our program currently are self-referred. They don't have to be, but there's a fear of what it might mean if they come into our program. But they meet the mission criteria for our program. If they're licensed and they reside in California, they have a substance use disorder and/or a mental illness, and they voluntarily request admission into the program. So that means that, and that's in the statute, they have to say that they want to be in the program. Now, they could come in the program if they're on probation and it's part of their stipulated settlement. And again, that's because they've agreed to it. That's part of their voluntary agreement to come in the program. They do not meet the admission criteria if they've been previously disciplined by the board for substance abuse or mental illness in a, not with enforcement, but for things like selling or patient harm, and previously terminated, or previously terminated for noncompliance or public risk. And they may be denied admission to our program if they, as I mentioned, diverted drugs for sale or present too great of a risk to the public. In other words, if they've caused patient harm or death. We've had I've been with the program for 15 years. In the 15 years with the program, we've had 2 instances of patient harm in all of the years with the program. One of them was a dentist in the years with the program, and it was several years ago, but he nodded off while he was working on a patient. But that was the only instance of patient harm that we've had with the dentists in the program, because we monitor them so closely, and we're making sure that they're safe to practice before they can return to work. So this is our process. We provide education and outreach, and I mentioned this during the break to Dr. Montez, that I think that we need to partner up with Carlos and do some, is he here? Did he come back? You're gonna be hearing from me, Carlos. We need to provide more presentations to the public. We do that, and what we need to do is partner up and do them jointly, I think. We will go to schools, we'll go to networking organizations, we'll go to facilities, and provide education and outreach. And in fact, it's part of our contract with the DCA to do so. It's been really tough during the pandemic. Things are starting to open up for us now. They're being more open and available to us to come on site. We do intakes, we provide case management, support, and monitoring, and referral to services. We oversee treatment. We provide an assessment, and then we send participants out for another assessment after we do our assessment. So we get 2 opinions when somebody comes into our program, our own internal from our case manager and a second opinion from a clinician in the community. And we combine those to determine what level of care the individual needs when they come into the program. And then we refer into treatment. We do drug testing, support groups, which are facilitated peer support groups. We ensure that they attend 12-step or community support groups. So if it's not 12-step like NA or AA, then it can be another type of non-religious or secular community support group, but something in the community where they're getting peer support. Typically, they start with daily meetings when they first come into the program. And then when they do return to work, they're initially removed from work. When they do return to work, we ensure that they have a worksite monitor in place who checks on them and is providing reports back to us to make sure that they're safe in the workplace. And then check in with us and provide monthly self-reports. So who is the intervention program? The participants in the middle. We have the board, and we have to report back to the board. There's Maximus, there's the support group facilitator, the intervention evaluation committee, or the diversion evaluation committee, the random drug testing, and the worksite monitor. And I'm going to talk about each of those components in just a second. So initially, as I mentioned, we do a phone assessment by intake. The case manager does that. Currently, our case managers are registered nurses and a licensed professional counselor. The case manager for the dental board is a registered nurse. Her name is Pam Moore, and she handles all of the dental board participants. Then we send to a clinical assessment in the community. They're all licensed clinicians, either marriage and family therapists or social workers. We have a PhD also in the community. So it depends on who's in the available to do the assessment, or when they were doing them in person, it was who was near where they lived, but mostly now they're by Zoom. And then, as recommended, we refer them into treatment, to an appropriate treatment program. We may send them for an additional 3-day clinical assessment if we have concerns about their status, and we need a more in-depth assessment. And then the participant needs to communicate with the team weekly until they're seen by the committee, and then they can be seen monthly or communicate with us monthly or as needed. They attend those 12-step meetings. We start them at daily meetings. 90 and 90 is pretty standard. AA, NA, Celebrate Recovery, Rational Recovery, Smart Recovery. It depends on what they feel the most comfortable with. It might be Al-Anon, or if they have issues with other family members as well, so CODA. It just depends on what fits their individual needs. They go to once or twice a week, a peer support group as well. And then they write a monthly self-report and call in monthly to check in. This is what a diversion evaluation committee looks like. This actually is one, this was a nursing committee, but they look like this. They're meetings in a conference room. The committee meets around the table. The case manager's there. The committee members are there. It's a unique model to California, and it's amazingly effective. I'm really proud that we use this model, and it's a really strong and powerful model. And 5 of the 8 boards use this model. And this is what, for us, Bagley-Keene has been a real pain for us, because we are now returning to in-person meetings, and it's expensive. These meetings are now being held at the dental board offices in the conference room in the dental board, in the back of right next to Dr. Montez's office. And they meet around the table, and the case manager and the dental board committee attends. The committee is appointed by this board, so they are really, I think, considered a subcommittee of the board. Is that right? I think they're considered a subcommittee of the board. This, the committee formally reviews and accepts participants, so that's written in statute, that that's their role, is to determine that the participants are appropriate for the program and to accept them into the program. They make recommendations for their ongoing recovery plan, and they also are responsible to graduate or to complete a participant when they're done with the program. Again, a participant is in the program for 5 years. And so it's, everyone on the committee is either in recovery themselves or responsible to work in the field, and so, or both. And, you know, you can't pull one over on this committee. They know, they understand the disease, and it's an amazingly powerful process. It's very, very effective. We do random drug testing. We use hair and nails, blood, saliva, and urine. We have flexible options for drug testing. You might occasionally hear that they are that they're not reliable, or that there's Wellbutrin might cause a false positive for amphetamine. Well, that's not the case, because we use certified labs and we use a high level of testing that doesn't allow for that. Those kinds of false positives happen with the dipstick testing that they do in less sophisticated settings. We have very sensitive cutoff levels. We don't use point-of-care testing methods. We only use SAMHSA certified laboratories. Again, we use those varied collection methods, and when the pandemic hit, we were able to use video collections and oral fluid testing when people couldn't leave home because they were on quarantine. Not as reliable as the urine testing. Urine testing is really considered the gold standard. We use that most often, but we had other options when people were homebound. So we have a lot of different options that we can use. Blood testing for alcohol, for what's called PEth testing, it's phosphatidylethanol, gives us a 3-week window of detection. We have also have ETG testing on all of the urine panels that we use. That's ethyl glucuronide is a biomarker for alcohol that has a 3 or 4 day window of detection. So it's not just immediate impairment for alcohol that you might get from a blood alcohol or a breathalyzer, but it actually looks for recent use more than just in immediate use. So we have some pretty sophisticated drug testing methods. So the participants are responsible to check in daily. It's their responsibility to check in by mobile app or by web, and then they must test on that same day that they're selected. Again, we have low cutoff values, and we have a very extensive test panel. The labs used to call it the California panel, and other states have adopted it because it's as extensive and as sensitive as it is. We most often use urine, and I mentioned ETG and ETS and PEth, and we also can use hair testing. We randomly insert a hair test and a PEth test during the course of the year. It's just included in the participants' testing. Hair does about a 3-month sample, and it says not currently using breath, sweat, or SoberLink, but we do have the option for that if we need to. Before I go on that, because that was a real quick review of drug testing, does anybody have any questions about drug testing? Okay. Participants are returned to work. They're initially removed from work. The dental board has a unique agreement in our contract that they have a 10-day delay before they're removed from work so that they can protect their practice and let their patients know that they need to be removed from work unless they're an imminent threat. If we determine that they're too high of a risk to the public, we would work with the board staff to remove them immediately. But generally, they have a 10-day window where they can close their practice. We remove them from work. We're required by the uniform standards to have 30 days of negative tests before an individual can return to practice. So we work with that requirement. But they must request to return to work from their committee. That's that committee that I showed you the picture of the people sitting around the table. And so the DEC evaluates their readiness to return to work by considering their compliance with all of the program requirements, their drug test results, their recommendations from their support group, their own readiness. So we have them write an essay telling us how they feel they're ready, what they're going to face when they return, what kind of triggers they're going to face in the workplace, what was there before, did they have access to drugs, and are they going to have access again, and what's that going to mean to them, how are they going to handle that, and how are they going to do a relapse prevention plan for returning to work. And I mentioned all that. They're going to do that relapse prevention plan. And then the case manager also evaluates with them their readiness to return to work. When a job is offered, or if they're returning to their own practice, they must identify a worksite monitor. So often they're the practice owner. And in that case, there are certain provisions that we have to make to find someone else in the community that can oversee their practice, someone that can come in randomly unannounced and take a look and just see that they're safe, they're not unkempt or looking frazzled, that they're practicing safely, that they can look at their clinical practice and make sure that it's safe. If they're the practice owner, the practice manager might be their wife or their spouse or a family member. They can't be the worksite monitor. It has to be someone who's not related or someone who's not beholden to them for financial reasons. So we have to find a worksite monitor who's someone in the community who can be objective. So we help them to work through that and find someone who can come in and take a look and make sure that they're safe to practice. And then we provide training to the worksite monitor, how to identify signs of relapse, how to identify that they're safe to practice. They submit the org chart, the job description, and the worksite monitor must provide us with an affidavit that says that they meet the criteria, they've been trained, and that they understand the expectations. So I'm going to talk about program costs. I'm almost getting to the end, so hang in there with me. The intake assessment is no charge. The clinical assessment is no charge. If we do send them to a 3-day clinical assessment, they do have to pay for that. So if they have to go for a more intensive assessment, then they are charged for that. That charge varies. It depends on where they go. There are places that do specific healthcare professional intensive assessments, and those fees vary from a couple thousand to 10,000. It depends on where they go for that. The program administrative fee, dentists pay $100 a month. Again, some of the other programs pay $464 a month because they pay the full administrative fee, but the dentists pay $100 a month because the board is paying the balance, and RNs pay $25 a month. The support group fee varies. I'm sorry, that $75 a month is not accurate. That's for nursing generally. The non-nursing participants pay, it's closer to $200 to $300 a month because they're going with clinical professionals. That's my error, that shouldn't be on there. They pay their own healthcare costs. If they have healthcare insurance, they bill their insurance, whatever that might be, so that's gonna vary. And the random drug testing is $57.50 per test plus the cost of collection. Collection fees also vary depending on where they're going, what kind of test is being collected. And then at the last year in the program is transition, and they have to request transition. And so then they do a self-reflection autobiography. They talk to us about their lives, Really, the objective of this is to, we back off on the monitoring and start allowing the participant to kind of do their own, making sure that they're more independent. We don't require them to go to 12-step meetings or community meetings anymore. If they want to, we encourage them, but they don't have to prove to us that they're going. And they have to demonstrate that they're living in a manner that supports their ongoing recovery. And then successful completion, the length of time in the program varies depending on how they've done and how successful they've been. It's generally 5 years for dentists. They have to have shown no evidence of relapse. And generally, as I said, 5 years of program participation, and recovery works. Wow, you did it. We did it.
Thank you, Ms. Matthews. Are there any other board questions for Ms. Matthews? I see none. Someone here, Dr. Wu?
You.
You, sorry, I'm all messed up today.
Thank you for changing my
Dr.
name.
Yu. I'll get it.
Yeah, really a great presentation.
Thank you.
I enjoy every single minute of it. And then as practitioner for both field, acupuncture and also dental, and also resident of San Francisco, I see in the nighttime, if you drive around Tenderloin Civic Center, you see so many people are under the influence. So I think this is so important for us nowadays. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I have so much more. When I present to facilities or to schools, it's an hour and a half, 2-hour presentation. I brought it way down for you, but thank you.
Other board questions? Seeing, Dr. Liren?
Hi, thank you for the presentation, wonderful.
Thank you.
I just wanted to ask you if this, can we have something like this placed on our website? Because I just looked and there's not a very thorough explanation of the diversion program. Something that would, can get more information, entice somebody to join, make them feel comfortable to apply. Can we do that?
Sure.
Something on the website?
Yeah, we can work to put something on the website. And I believe we are also going to include something in the newsletter.
Noted, Dr. Liren, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other board member questions? Is there any public comment on this presentation? If not, then thank you, Ms. Matthews. Appreciate that a lot. A lot of heavy information, a very important area for our members. Okay. We're now going to move on to item 9C, and that's going to be the Controlled Substance or the Cures Program. I'm going to ask Mr. Alvarez to come back and speak to us about that.
Good afternoon, Carlos Alvarez, now presenting agenda item number 9, Cures. The data that was collected for Cures was as of June 30th, 2023. And as you reviewed your materials, you can see that outbound searches have been collected, and that's as of June, it was 138 searches. With inbound interstate searches, still not collecting that data. The state of Oregon is still testing their system, so it hasn't been implemented yet. And currently, right now, Department of Justice is still working with Nevada and Arizona with data sharing. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
Are there any board member questions? Seeing none. Is there any public comment on this report? None, thank you. This is informational, obviously. Let's, thank you, Mr. Alvarez.
Thank
Let's move
you.
on to item number 10A. And this is Ms. Regali coming up. Thank you. And this is the update on dental licensure and permit statistics. And Paige Regali is coming up. She's the Chief of Dental Programs and Customer Support. Good afternoon, Ms. Regali.
Good afternoon, Dr. Felsenfeld and members of the board. As Dr. Felsenfeld said, my name is Paige Regali. I'm the Chief of Dental Programs and Customer Support. And today I will be presenting agenda item 10A, which begins on page 93 of your meeting materials. The memo provides an application statistics, law and ethics written examination statistics, and license and permit statistics for the dental licensing and examination unit. Page 101 of your meeting materials includes the date of the last occupational analysis done by the Office of Professional Examination Services, which is 2018. The target date for the next occupational analysis is 2025. The table on this page is not current, as the reports used to retrieve this data were experiencing issues. So unfortunately, we don't have the current data as of June 30th, so the data reflected in that table is still as of March 31st of 2023. Beginning on page 105 of your meeting materials, the tables provide statistics on current and active dental licenses by county and on the population per dental license from fiscal year 2021 through June 30th of 2023. Yuba County, again, has the highest population per dentist, and both Sierra and Alpine counties have the lowest population per dentist. There is no action requested, and this concludes this agenda item. I'm available for questions. Thank you.
And there it is. Are there any board member comments on the data? Dr. Molina, no? All right. Dr. Motez.
Okay, so I just want to point out that the Office of Professional Examination Services is beginning the occupational analysis for the dentist profession. So that's very exciting, and we'll be reaching out to subject matter experts, and we will also be sending out a survey that will ask them to evaluate certain duties that are performed and so forth. So as we get closer to that survey, we will give you a heads up so that we can make sure we get a nice robust sample size of respondents on this. And I'm sure you will all fill out the survey as well, because you will receive it as a licensee. And then I'd also like to point out too, while I have Ms. Regali up here, Paige, is you all heard of the presentation earlier today on enforcement, and they talked about DCU, and that's also under Paige's purview. She's our resident expert on that, and so as you know, when you communicate with her on discipline and stuff, she's been very helpful in assisting us and training our new staff person. So wanted to point that out while we had her up here. Thanks, Paige.
Thank you.
Are we good? Public comment on Ms. Regali's report? Seeing none, let's move on to the next item. Did I miss someone here? No? Okay, let's move on to the next item. And it's agenda item number 11. I'm sorry.
Public comment, apologies. Did you ask for public comment?
I asked?
Okay.
Yeah, there was none. Thank you. Agenda item number 11 is the report of the July 26, 2023 meeting of the Elective Facial Cosmetic Surgery Permit Credentialing Committee, and we'll have a discussion and possible action. So, Ms. Regali, please present it to us.
Thank you again, Dr. Felsenfeld. I will now be presenting agenda item 11, which is the report on the July 26, 2023 meeting of the Elective Facial Cosmetic Surgery Permit Credentialing Committee, also known as EFCS, which begins on page 108 of your meeting materials. The EFCS permit is for oral and maxillofacial surgeons and enables them to perform elective facial cosmetic surgery after meeting statutory requirements. An unlimited EFCS permit entitles the permit holder to perform any cosmetic procedures in Category 1 and Category 2 as defined in Business and Professions Code 1638.1. The committee that reviews these applications is comprised of 5 members who are appointed by the board. They meet quarterly or as needed to review and discuss applications. 2 are physicians, and surgeons, each with unique specialties, and 3 of them are oral and maxillofacial surgeons, again, all with unique specialties. After reviewing an application, the committee makes a recommendation to the board on whether or not to issue an EFCS permit to an applicant. The committee may recommend issuing an unlimited permit, or it may recommend currently issuing a restricted permit that limits the procedures that an applicant may perform. The committee will recommend a restricted permit if it is not satisfied that the applicant has the training or competence to perform each certain procedures within each category, or if the applicant has not requested permission to perform all the procedures specified within each category. The committee met on July 26, 2023 in person to review and discuss one application. 4 committee members were present. The application was tabled pending receipt of supplemental documentation that later was received and deemed to satisfy the requirements and what the committee was looking for. The committee then recommended that the permit application be approved for unlimited privileges for Category 1 and 2. If the board agrees with the committee's recommendation, the board is asked to move forward to approve the EFCS permit application of Dr. Samuel Liu for unlimited privileges for Category 1 and 2.
Thank you. Is there any discussion before we look for the nomination, or I should say a motion on behalf of the board? Okay. Then do we have someone who's willing to make a motion for Dr. Samuel Liu to present, to be able to do Categories 1 and 2 in the cosmetic surgery arena?
Pacheco, move to approve.
Ms. Pacheco has said that, and do I have a second? Thank you, Dr. Chan, and we have that. Is there any further board discussion? Seeing none. Is there any public comment on this applicant? Seeing none, I think we're ready to vote. Dr. Loreen, would you call the vote?
You want me to repeat the motion? Repeat the motion is to approve the EFCS permit application of Samuel Liu, DDS, for unlimited Category 1 and 2 privileges. We'll take the vote. Chan?
Chan, aye.
Chan, aye. Felsenfeld?
Felsenfeld, aye.
Felsenfeld, aye. Forge?
Forge, aye.
Forge, aye. Ladine, aye. McKenzie?
McKenzie, yes.
McKenzie, aye. Medina?
Medina, aye.
Medina, aye. Molina?
Molina, aye.
Molina, aye. Olage?
Olagi, yes.
Olage, aye. Pacheco?
Pacheco, aye.
Pacheco, aye. And you?
You, aye.
You, aye. The motion passes.
Thank you, and we will let Dr. Liu know that he has that privilege now. Thank you very much, Ms. Regali.
Thank you.
Let's move on to item number 12, discussion of possible action on the Access to Care Committee report. Just a quick introduction. Earlier this year, I talked about the fact that we've reestablished some of our two-person committees to do some work for us while we're not meeting and to be able to get some information together. And Dr. Loreen is going to present on the Committee on Access to Care. So
Yes, I am.
if
Thank
you would
very
like to do
much.
that for us, we'd appreciate what you've been doing and tell us what you've learned and what you'd like us to do for you.
And yes, as you mentioned, the
And
Access
again, please come closer to the microphone, please.
The
Thank you.
Access to Care Committee has not met in quite a while, so this is the first meeting that we had recently. I am Chair for the Access to Care Committee, and I will be presenting a report of recent committee activities. Dr. Yogita Thakur, board member, is also part of the committee. Dr. Thakur and I met with Dr. Jayanth Kumar, Dental Director of California, on June 20th, 2023. We met with Dr. Kumar to gather ideas and explore opportunities on how the Dental Board Access to Care Committee could better serve the profession of dentistry and our communities. After some discussion, various options with Dr. Kumar, the committee is proposing that we concentrate the Dental Board Access to Care efforts in addressing staffing shortages in the profession. By working on increasing the workforce in dentistry, we believe we can help increase access to care in the state. And I did want to mention that in Carlos Alvarez's presentation, our vision and our mission clearly states that we serve the public health and access to care. So this is a big part of what we do. And we really don't have a lot of funds for that. So right now, we are hoping that the board will approve the work that we would like to concentrate our efforts on and the staff shortages. And you have the 4 action items in front of you. Explore strategies to improve licensure examination transparency. For example, add more content to candidate information, bulletins to assist with exam preparation. Maybe some sample questions. I do know we have something on the website that explains what the exam is about and what to look at. I just saw it, but it would be helpful to have other items in there, like maybe sample questions, like other exams do, like the Dental Board Part 1 and 2, they have sample questions. Okay, the second action would be evaluate the impact of examination administration time on candidates who use a second language that is not English. We spoke about other boards that from Consumer Affairs that have Spanish exams, but so we want to study this and see if this is appropriate for the Dental Board. And that was mentioned earlier too, by the way. Number 3, survey candidates to determine how they study for examinations and why they are failing them. So we've had reports on how candidates are failing 2-3 exams, RDAs are failing 2-3 exams, and they can't pass. I know I have one assistant in my office that's probably taken about like 3 times, so we want to know why this is happening, how they're studying, so we'd like to provide a survey. So the 4th one is to analyze the pathways of licensure for registered dental assistants to determine if the pathways are facilitating access to practice in a fair and valid manner. So this is, well, maybe there's other ways of to license, for RDAs, and we were personally thinking in that committee, that meeting that we had, that there are foreign dental graduates outside working in other fields. And maybe we could clear a pathway that they could just, instead of waiting the 15 months or going back to school, maybe we can do some type of credentialing, like Dr. Tracy Montez mentioned to me, credentialing process, where we can just look at their credentials and evaluate and see if they are ready to take that exam. Or maybe they could just go straight to taking that exam. So at this time, the Access Committee is requesting that the board move to authorize the committee to take the 4 actions listed in today's meeting agenda item 12 so that the committee can work with board staff and provide status reports at future board meetings. So
That sounds like it was a motion, is that
Yep.
correct?
Yes.
Thank you. Is there any further board discussion about this motion? Seeing none, is there any public comment on this? I know. Wait.
Hello, thank you. Tuka Zokai from the California Dental Association. So we have a couple of questions about the items. So item 2, to evaluate the impact of examination administration. You mentioned that other boards have exams that may be offered in Spanish, but when you say exam administration, is that just the exam itself or everything to help support the applicant or individual in the exam? So it's not just the exam itself. Thank you. And then for item 4, for pathways and the credentialing process, in terms of pathways, AB 481 does work to address some of the pathways to dental assisting licensure and may be relevant to some of the work that your team has conducted. So we do try to find pathways to licensure for registered dental assistants to determine if the pathways are facilitating access. And so we would ask for there to be the motion to investigate really items 2 and 4 in more detail.
Are you
done?
suggesting an amendment to the motion?
No, so for the motion itself to investigate items 2 and 4 in more detail than they currently are.
If I
written.
might, Ms. Okay. This is a motion that's asking them to continue to research this. And it's not limiting anything. They can keep working in these 4 areas to see if we get better access to care based on what they find out. You will have absolute options for putting input into them and talking with them. The beauty of having a subcommittee is they can go around and do all that with you.
Okay,
So,
perfect.
So I think you're going to be okay in terms of what you're asking for.
Awesome. Thank you so
Thank
much. Thanks
you.
for your work.
Thank you.
Any other public comment on this motion? Ms. Decker? Good morning, Sherry Becker. Good afternoon, I should say.
Good afternoon. Sherry Becker, representing the Alliance. I think also in consideration, thank you for your committee work, but also consider possibly a survey regarding salaries as well might be helpful to your committee. Thank you.
Okay,
Excellent.
thank you. All ideas will be looked at, certainly. They're going to come back to us again and again, perhaps, over the next period of time to put more teeth into this. Oh, that's a terrible pun. I'm so sorry. All right. Any other public comment on this? Did we have a second on the motion? I seconded. All right, so let us move on to a vote. Dr. Lirin, if you'll take the vote for us.
Okay. Chan.
Chan, aye.
Chan, aye. Felsenfeld.
Felsfeld, aye.
Felsenfeld, aye. Forge?
Forge, aye.
Forge, aye. Larin, aye. McKenzie?
McKenzie, yes.
McKenzie, aye. Medina?
Medina, aye.
Medina, aye. Molina?
Molina, aye.
Molina, aye. Olage?
Olagi, aye.
Olage, aye. Pacheco?
Pacheco, aye.
Pacheco, aye. You?
UI.
You, aye. Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you, and congratulations. This is good. This is where we'd like to function with these little committees doing this work and bringing it back to us. That's great. All right, Ms. Olney, come on back up here. Was there, Ms. Olney, the next item is, are we okay? Something you
Yeah,
wanna say?
actually, yeah, can I make a quick comment before we go on to the next item? I just really want to thank Dr. Slicker and Loren for working with me on that, because they took the initiative to go meet and have these conversations, generate ideas, and then they circled back and said, okay, we have all these great ideas, what's feasible, what can we do? And we kind of crafted out these. And again, they're very general, they're just first steps. But again, a great example of a subcommittee charging forward with some ideas and then coming back and saying, okay, what's feasible? So, thank you.
And thank you for being very helpful, Dr. Montes.
And thank you for
also.
your hard work, too. It takes a while, I get that. All right, item number 13, A, general anesthesia and sedation permits, inspections and evaluation statistics. Ms. Jessica Olney,
Thank you, Dr. Felsenfeld. Am I coming in loud enough?
mostly.
Mostly.
Don't step away from the mic and don't
Okay.
lower your voice.
My name's Jessica Only, Anesthesia Unit Manager, and I'll be presenting Agenda Item 13A, which begins on page 112 of your meeting materials. This memo provides a statistical overview of board-administered on-site inspections and evaluations for general anesthesia, medical general anesthesia, and moderate sedation permits. This memo does not include statistics on on-site inspections and evaluations for conscious sedation permits because the conscious sedation permits were eliminated by Senate Bill 501 as of January 1, 2022. Evaluations for the conscious sedation permits stopped as of September 2022, and existing permit holders may follow the terms of that permit until it expires, even if they were due for completion of an evaluation. Beginning on page 113 of your materials, the statistical tables show the results of the general anesthesia, medical general anesthesia, and moderate sedation on-site inspections and evaluations that include data for the 4 previous fiscal years and the first quarter of 2023-2024. The results are separated by permit type and include data on the current evaluator pool, which is separated by Northern and Southern California regions. No action is requested on this report as the data provided is informational, and I'm available to answer any questions.
I would like to, just to be sure, my head is not clear anymore, but we had an opportunity to renew early on our general anesthesia permits and including the endorsement. You're going to talk about the endorsement next item. Let's let
Yes.
that go for now.
Yes.
All right, so I have no other questions right now. Anyone else on the board have questions about this report? All right, is there any public comment on the report? Dr. Witcher?
Dr. Bruce Witcher, CDA. Yes, it looks like the general anesthesia program's in pretty good shape. And also, it's gratifying to see we're actually seeing some of the medical general anesthesia evaluations getting done. And there isn't a huge backlog, it appears, in that area, because there do seem to be evaluators that are available. We don't see a lot of postponements for lack of evaluators there, even though we don't have very many. The telling thing is in the table that shows the number of evaluators that are available for all the different categories, with MS only having 2. And we know why that is, and we've heard your discussions about that and the statutory limitations that make it difficult to impanel new evaluators. I mean, talking to Ms. Olney, from what I understand, a lot of the conscious sedation evaluators are still functioning off their old permits. They haven't expired yet, so they're not really going to be eligible until they come up for renewal as an MS permit holder. Then maybe we can fill out that pool of evaluators, because we used to have like 55 or 60 of them, and to be down to 2, well, there's a lot of people out there that I think could still be recalled, and I'm sure they'll come forward. It's just we have this one little hold up there. The one thing to keep in mind is the evaluations have a very low failure rate. Most people will fail on the simulated emergencies, if anything, which of course is a key part of the whole thing. So it's sort of a good news, bad situation. Yeah, that program may be behind, but I don't think it's a huge threat to public safety, seeing the statistics that we have from moderate sedation and conscious sedation providers. So thank you.
Thank you. This might fall under the next category as well somewhat, in terms of the changing, so, thank you.
Yes, I did want to clarify, we do have
I think you want to
four.
wait, huh? Okay, thank you, Dr. Witcher.
We have
had
four
this in
moderate
informational
sedation
reports, so let us move on.
Yes.
Let us move on to the next item on the agenda, which is 13B, an update regarding the board implementation of Senate Bill 501 Glazer, as we like to call it.
Yes.
Ms. Olney.
Thank you again, Dr. Felsenfeld. Again, Jessica Olney, Anesthesia Unit Manager, and I'll be presenting Agenda Item 13B, which begins on page 123 of your meeting materials. This memo updates the board on the implementation of Senate Bill 501, which became effective January 1st of 2022. And I'll sound like I'm repeating myself because we've covered this subject for several years. But for those who are new, Senate Bill 501 made changes to the general anesthesia, medical general anesthesia permits. It eliminated the conscious sedation and oral conscious sedation for minors permits. It created a new moderate sedation and pediatric minimal sedation permits, and created a new pediatric endorsement for the general anesthesia, medical general anesthesia, and moderate sedation permits, as well as established new monitoring requirements for the administration of moderate sedation, deep sedation, or general anesthesia to a minor patient. The regulations implementing SB 501 were approved on August 16th of 2022, and board staff received their first application under the new regulations on August 26th of 2022. Page 125 of your meeting materials includes a table showing the total number of anesthesia and sedation permit applications received, the total number of deficient applications, and the total number of applications that have been approved between August 22nd and July 19th of 2023, when the meeting materials were finalized. Additional applications have been received, and as of August 15, I'd like to report that 48 applications for general anesthesia have been approved, 38 applications for pediatric endorsement have been approved, 16 initial applications for medical general anesthesia permits have been approved, 34 applications for pediatric endorsement of medical general anesthesia permits have been approved, 227 initial applications for moderate sedation have been approved, 9 initial applications for pediatric endorsement for moderate sedation have been approved, and 128 initial applications for pediatric minimal sedation permits have been approved. During this time, board staff and legal counsel have also identified areas in current law which could benefit from legislative amendments, and legislative proposals were presented to and approved by the board at prior board meetings to be included in the Sunset Report. As board staff continue to work on the implementation of SB 501, we will continue to identify issues with the sedation and anesthesia permits and bring those to the board for discussion. On page 127 of your meeting materials, you'll also find a table of the number of existing permits that will expire each month for the calendar years of 2023 and 2024, which will update for all future meetings. And again, this is information that's provided to you as informational only, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay. My question has been answered, what I was thinking about earlier, because I read the paragraph that was answering it for me. Is there any board comment or questions for Ms. Olney? Seeing none, Dr. Witcher, you have something else you want to talk about?
Just wanted
2
to
minutes.
mention one thing.
2 minutes.
There's one statistic that you might want to have in there. The information is available elsewhere. That's the number of adult oral conscious sedation permits. That'll be in the licensing and permit statistics that come out, but it isn't listed in part of this. Traditionally, the pediatric oral conscious sedation and adult oral conscious sedation permits were the most widely subscribed to. So it would be nice to track those two together. Just a suggestion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. If there are no other public comments, we can move on. So we're now going to go to item number 13C, and that is a discussion of possible action regarding an appointment of a general anesthesia, medical general anesthesia, or moderate sedation permit evaluators. Ms. Olney, you're still with us. Go for it.
I am still here. Thank you again, Dr. Felsenfeld. Jessica Olney, Anesthesia Unit Manager, and I'll be presenting Agenda Item 13C, which begins on page 128 of your meeting materials. The board conducts on-site inspections and evaluations of general anesthesia, medical general anesthesia, and moderate sedation permit applicants and permit holders. The evaluations include the facility, equipment, personnel, and procedures used. The evaluation team consists of 2 or more evaluators for the first evaluation, or if an applicant has failed an evaluation. For each subsequent evaluation, only 1 evaluator is required. I do want to clarify that for existing general anesthesia and medical general anesthesia permit holders who renewed or were issued a permit prior to January 1 of 2022, they are still required to have 2 evaluators present. We will transition to the single evaluator once they renew for the first time after January 1. To increase the pool of available evaluators, board staff post a continuous recruitment notice on the board's website. Board staff also contact newly approved moderate sedation permit holders who previously held conscious sedation permits and may have served as evaluators for the conscious sedation program, and to invite them to become evaluators for the moderate sedation program. So we do notify each new moderate sedation permit holder. We invite them to apply if they previously held a conscious sedation permit. This memo includes an application for Dr. James Snow, who has applied to become an evaluator for the moderate sedation program. Board staff have reviewed the application and recommend approval of their appointment. We ask the board to consider staff's recommendation and make a motion to appoint Dr. Snow as an evaluator for the on-site inspection and evaluation program.
So staff has looked at his credentials, and they're comfortable that everything's in order, and he can be a moderate sedation evaluator.
Correct.
Thank you. Is there any board comment on the report? Seeing none, I'll make a motion then that Dr. James Snow, if I got this right, is to be approved as an evaluator for moderate sedation. And he's met the requirements. Is there a second?
Pacheco.
Ms. Pacheco, thank you very much. Is there any other board comment on this individual? No, thank you. And is there any public comment on this individual? Seeing none, we'll take a vote. Dr. Lerin, on whether or not we should approve Dr. James Snow as a moderate sedation evaluator.
Chan.
Can I?
Chan, aye. Felsenfeld.
Felsenfeld, aye.
Felsenfeld, aye. Forge.
Forge, aye.
Forge, aye. Larin, aye. McKenzie.
McKenzie, yes.
McKenzie, aye. Medina.
Medina, aye.
Medina, aye. Molina.
Molina, aye.
Molina, aye. Lolage.
Olagi, aye.
Lolage, aye. Pacheco.
Pacheco, aye.
Pacheco, aye. You.
You, aye.
You, aye. Motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Pizzoli. And we'll let Dr. Snow know. Put him to work. All right. We're now at item number 14, which will be discussion and possible action. I'm sorry. We can't hear you. Turn my mic on? I can't hear me because I'm deaf. Thank you. Thank you very much, Ms. McKenzie. So we're now at item number 14, which will be discussion and possible action regarding the 2024 meeting dates. Dr. Montez is going to tell us why we're looking at it now.
Good afternoon. So yes, usually we take this up at the November board meeting, but because there is such a premium on meeting space and we're not sure how SB 544 is going to roll out as far as options for hybrids and things like that, I thought, you know what, let's try and get these dates calendared so Morella can work her magic and get all the hearing rooms booked. So, we know life changes and things come up, but our board meetings appear to historically fall within the same weekends each year. So I do have one deviation that I'm asking the board to consider. Again, it's just a thought. But so with that, I'd like to just start at looking at the dates here that we have. And again, Morella put this item together for us, and it includes the calendars in the back. So if you look at the pages, 1 32 on through 137, you'll see the calendar is there, and we've tried to indicate holidays as well as other association meetings that could potentially conflict. I thought we'd just talk about each one at a time, and then perhaps a motion to approve the set of dates, but the first one is February. And I'd like to point out, too, that we don't have locations yet. What we will probably recommend is doing the February, August, November meetings in Northern California, likely Sacramento, with the May meetings in Southern California, whether it's San Diego or Anaheim, wherever, something like that. But that's hopefully what will end up doing, again, trying to be efficient and cost savings and so forth with travel.
I have a question.
Yes.
So here where it says proposed board meetings dates 2024 and it says February 2023?
Those would be 24. Yes,
right?
thank
These are all
you.
2024
Yes.
numbers, not 2023s.
Good catch. These are all 24. We're not moving
That's just a
backwards.
mistake, a typo.
Yes. So looking at the first one, February 8th and 9th, again, traditionally, the boards had an early February meeting time. And then our next meeting would be May, and I'm going to skip that and come back to it. August 15th, 16th, again, very similar to this week. And then November, we try to do early November to avoid the November holiday. And a lot of times our other DCA boards and bureaus meet maybe the week before the Thanksgiving holiday, which makes webcasting challenging. So we do ours fairly early in November. I think those 3 months are fairly consistent. Where we're deviating, and again, I'll open this up, or have Dr. Felsenfeld can open this up for discussion, but the May meeting, in the past, it's traditionally been held during the CDA Presents Conference down in Anaheim. And I was rather surprised. I assumed that because the dental board has always done that was because we'd have a lot of people attending from CDA. And instead, I saw the same wonderful faces at the meeting in Anaheim, and nobody knew. And then I also heard of some conflicts that some of our members had, that there were classes that they wanted to take, but we had the meeting. And so I thought, well, maybe we shouldn't necessarily have the board meeting that same week. I don't know. Again, something to think about. Maybe we wanted to have it the week earlier so that people could go to CDA or come to the board meeting. Just a thought. So we threw in a couple of dates there, again, wanting to avoid the Memorial Day weekend and things like that. So I guess, is it okay if we open it up to conversation, discussion? Yes.
Absolutely. If the board wants to make some comments about that now, if
Yes.
there's any concerns,
Yeah.
I guess particularly about the CDA part of it is what you're asking
Well,
about.
and
Or any of the dates.
any of the
Is
dates,
there
but I
any-
would like to eventually
on this side of the room?
have 4 dates.
Any issues at all?
Well, I have
Everyone
a question.
comfortable? Anything?
Forge.
Dr. Ford. Dr. Forge.
I have a question. If you're
Microphone on, please, and be close.
If you are moving the date from the CDA time and proposing it the weeks before, are you still considering Anaheim as a location?
Maybe. It's up to the board. The board may say, yeah, that's fine, or no, we'd rather go to San Diego, or we'd rather be in Sacramento. I'm not, well, that one I'm not as concerned with, assuming that it's off-site. The others, like I said, we will probably tentatively hold meeting rooms in Sacramento for these other 3 dates, assuming that we're going to be in Southern California somewhere, whether it's Anaheim or Long Beach or San Diego.
Well, I have a proposal or a question. Could it be possibly that we alternate, because I know that most of the meetings are here, because it's, I think you said before, cost-effective and less travel, I guess, for the majority. But if it could be alternate, like one time in Southern California and the next time in Northern versus 3 times in Northern California. Maybe that's something to consider. I don't know, but I just want to throw it out there.
Yes, and that's fine if the board wants to have the staff all travel down to Southern California. We'll load up everybody and take them down there.
I take it that's not popular.
Dr. Yu, and then Dr. Lirin.
Well, I just
Yeah.
want to say a guilt presenting mom here.
Dr. Yu, go ahead.
Okay, regarding the May schedule, I think it'll be tough if we travel 2 weeks in a row down south for CDA and also for the board meeting. And I think it'll be great if we still have the meeting on the May 15, 1 day earlier, and then we finish on 16. And then we can still attend a lot of classes, 16 afternoon, 17, 18. That will be my input.
Oh, so you're saying have the board meeting start on Wednesday?
Yes.
And have a Wednesday, Thursday meeting?
Uh-huh, yes.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
All right, Dr. Lirin is next, then Dr. Chan, then Ms. McKenzie.
Yeah.
Dr. Lirin?
Yes, I totally agree with Dr. Yu in regards to that, and I personally prefer to be there already and just go to the CDA meeting. But I thought the purpose of having that meeting there is so other dentists that are attending the meeting might want to come to our meeting. I thought that was a
They never
purpose.
do.
I know, yeah, they never do. but
That's the point.
But
They
Thank you.
could.
But perhaps
They could.
having it on the 15th would have them come to the board meeting. No, maybe.
I'm guessing, Dr. Lirin, and I hate to put this down, but I don't think the dental board's very exciting to a lot of other dentists. We think it's important, and we know it is. All right, I think Dr. Chan was next, then Ms. McKenzie, and Dr. Yu, are you complete? Are you done? Thank you.
So not any opinion on the date, but part of the equation might be considered that CDA is considered dropping the Northern California session and just doing one a year in Anaheim as we move forward.
There's a CD up there too, right? Ms. McKenzie, I think you're next, and Dr. Lirin, you're done? Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I was just going to give a little more historical context because I think I'm the oldest person here now or been here longest. We actually didn't used to have it this week. So it's not that it's always been on the CDA week. It moved to the CDA week on a Wednesday, Thursday. Actually, it was always Wednesday, Thursday before the pandemic.
Right.
So that everyone who was traveling from the board, since we used to alternate north-south, north-south, so everyone who was traveling for the board didn't have to do like 2 weeks in a row. And that was the only one that we ever really had on a Wednesday, Thursday. But that's why we did that one on a Wednesday, Thursday, so that those who still wanted to attend all of the CDA could do that, so.
Thank you. Anyone else at the board level? Any public comment about what our meetings are? I would think not. Okay. If that is the case, we are about to adjourn for the evening. There will be a closed session, so, I'm sorry.
I would like a motion
You want to make a motion? I can't hear, you want to make a motion to do what? To look at these dates? I mean, this is something, why don't you do a doodle poll? You want, what kind of, I'll make a motion.
Kara said we don't need a motion.
To select the dates, you do that. I'm still can't. Yeah. No, this is gonna be we will, do a doodle poll or something. I think we're fine on all that. So as I was saying, we're about to adjourn. Thank you all for participating today. We had a nice meeting. We had some good presentations that brought us into the heart of what we do a little bit. And we're going to thank the staff and thank the public and ask you all to leave because we have to have a closed session. So have a nice night, and we'll see you tomorrow morning at 8:30.